Chapter 1. They say the Ashveil marshes swallow the living whole. Not like a predator, not clean and fast, the way a wolf brings down a deer with one precise snap of the jaw. No, the marshes take you slowly. They pull you down through cold mud, through black water, through layers of rotten silence, until the world above forgets you ever stood in it at all. I had spent 3 nights in those marshes, and I was still standing. Barely. The sound of her own breathing fills the dark. Tight and controlled. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Slow. 32 wolves. I counted them at dusk when they broke camp. 32 sets of lungs, 32 heartbeats, and every single one of them would tear my throat out if they knew what ran in my veins. The squelch of wet earth under paws. The cold press of fog against fur. The marshbind paste holds for 5 hours. I mixed it at midnight, bog iron clay, crushed night root, and 3 drops of real wolf blood from a vial I've been carrying for 6 months. It smells like the marsh floor. It smells like nothing. It smells like belonging. A pause. I've been running for 6 hours and 40 minutes. The fog sits low and heavy over the wetlands, thick as smoke, swallowing the moon in long, grey gulps. The cypress trees rise from the black water like fingers, gnarled and reaching, draped in curtains of hanging moss. And through it all, silent as thought, fast as guilt, the Ashveil Pack runs. They are enormous. Not the lean, rangy wolves a person might imagine from old stories. These are mountain-shouldered beasts, their coats dark as storm clouds, their eyes catching the rare gaps of moonlight and throwing it back in shades of silver and ember and deep, burning gold. At the head of the formation runs the largest wolf of all, Draven, the Storm King, Alpha of Ashveil, Lord of the Thornspire territories. Even in his wolf form, even at full sprint across treacherous ground, he moves like the world is something he owns. His coat is the color of a sky before lightning, a deep, bruised charcoal shot through with threads of silver. His eyes are the palest, coldest gold imaginable. Not warm gold. Not honeyed gold. The gold of a blade left out in winter. 3 lengths behind him runs his beater, Corvin, a massive tawny male with a jaw like a battering ram and the disposition of a gathering thunderstorm. And tucked neatly in the middle of the formation, running in perfect step with the younger wolves on her left flank, is a brown-gray female, smaller than the others, narrower through the shoulder. Her gait is correct, measured, pack-matched, economical. Her tail angle is right. Her ear position is right. Everything about her is right. Which is, of course, the most dangerous thing about her. Rule 1. Match the pace of the wolf directly ahead of you. Not the alpha. Never the alpha. You watch the alpha the way you'd watch a bonfire. Enough to track the heat. Never close enough to get burned. She watches Draven's powerful hindquarters as he surges through a patch of shallow water. Rule 2. Control the heartbeat. Wolves hear everything. They hear the pop of a twig 40 yards out, the wing beat of a marsh hawk overhead, the way a reed bends differently in wind versus footfall. A frightened heartbeat is a dinner bell. Her heartbeat. She counts it. 78 beats per minute. Too fast by 4. 7 to 4. You need 7 to 4. Think of still water. Think of cold stone. Think of nothing. 7 to 5. 7 to 6. 7 to 5. Close enough. A memory surfaces without permission. A woman's hands, rough and careful all at once, pressing dark clay paste into her skin, painting it up her arms, across her collarbones, along the line of her jaw. A voice, low and unhurried, speaking into the quiet of a candlelit room. The paste doesn't make you invisible, girl. Nothing makes you invisible. It makes you uninteresting. There's a difference. Invisible things get searched for. Uninteresting things get ignored. The memory dissolves. Back to the marsh. Back to the run. I've been uninteresting for 3 days. A beat. I'm very, very tired of it. The pack crosses a shallow channel, water spraying up in sheets of black and silver. She crosses with them, 4 paws finding the submerged stones with practiced precision. The cold water hits her belly. Don't flinch. Wolves don't flinch at cold water. Wolves are the cold water. She doesn't flinch. Ahead, Draven leaps a fallen cypress with contemptuous ease, barely breaking stride. The pack follows in sequence, each wolf clearing it cleanly, the younger ones with more scramble and less grace. She clears it in one smooth arc. She lands, and for just 1 fraction of a second, 1 half-breath of miscalculation, her left paw comes down at an angle that is not quite right. Not wrong enough to notice. Not wrong enough for any of the 31 wolves around her to register. Except, 40 yards ahead, at the tip of the formation, that charcoal and silver head tilts. Just a degree. Just a fraction. Just enough. He heard it. A cold thread of something, not fear, never fear. She doesn't let herself call it fear, moves through her chest. He heard the landing. One paw, one fraction of a second, one angle that wasn't wolf-born. She keeps running. She keeps her ears forward, her tail neutral, her pace unchanged. Don't react. Reacting is confessing. Keep running. If he stops, you stop when the others stop. If he turns, you look where the others look. You are no one. You are just another body in the dark. She watches the back of his massive head. He doesn't turn. Not yet. But the tilt of his ear has shifted. She knows that posture. She has studied it in sketches, in field reports, in the terrified descriptions of the Iron Vale's few survivors who had ever run from an Ashveil alpha. That is the posture of a wolf who has filed something away. Noticed it. Named it. Saved it. Not for now. For later. How far to the eastern crossing? She maps it in her mind. The Thornspire territories stretch for 40 miles east of this marsh. The pack's stronghold sits at the center, carved into a ridge of volcanic rock. But the eastern edge, the border where the Ashveil land meets the scrublands, is open. Unmanned. She'd confirmed that from a reconnaissance sketch 3 weeks ago. 12 miles. She's already run 9. 3 miles. 3 miles and I am out of their territory and into the scrublands, and the Pale Court will never find me in the scrublands. They hate dry ground. They. Ahead. Draven stops. Not a gradual slowing. Not a cautious halt. He simply stops. Like a wall appearing in the middle of a road. 31 wolves stop behind him in a ripple, the formation collapsing inward. She stops. Her heart rate. 8 or 9. The fog parts, just slightly, as if even the marsh knows to give Draven room. He stands at the edge of a wide, dark pool. Still water, black as ink, perfectly flat. The cypress trees ring it on 3 sides. The 4th side opens onto a narrow gravel bank. The pack waits. 31 wolves, breath misting in the cold air, ears pricked. Draven does not move. He doesn't sniff the air dramatically. He doesn't growl. He doesn't scan the pack with some slow, deliberate sweep. He simply stands at the water's edge. And waits. The silence stretches. 10 seconds. 20. The younger wolves begin to shift their weight, uncertain. Then, quiet, like a stone dropped into still water, his voice comes. Not spoken aloud. Not yet. But the alpha's command carries through the bond regardless. Felt more than heard. Pressing against the inside of the skull like a thumb against a bruise. We rest here. The pack begins to settle. Bodies lowering to the ground. Heads resting on paws. The brown-gray female does the same. Lowers carefully. Head down. Eyes half closed. Perfect. Draven turns. And for the first time in 3 nights, she sees his face. Even across 30 yards of dark water, even through fog and night and the careful blurring of her wolf form's perspective, it hits her like a fist to the sternum. He is not handsome the way men in stories are handsome. He is not soft-featured or warm-eyed or constructed for a woman's comfort. He is built the way a cliff face is built, for endurance, for intimidation, for the specific purpose of making everything around it feel smaller. A jaw cut from cold geometry. A mouth set in a line that has clearly never wasted a smile on anyone who hadn't earned it. And those eyes. Pale gold. Winter gold. Blade gold. Looking directly at her. Don't move. His looking in her direction. His not looking at her. He can't be. The paste is still working. She smells like the marsh. His looking at the water. His calculating the route. His thinking about the next leg of the run. He is not. Draven's gaze moves. Past her. To the wolf on her left. And back. It lingers. It lingers on the space just above her head. The way a man's gaze lingers on a door he's about to open. 63 heartbeats per minute. She wills herself back down. Still water. Cold stone. Nothing. His gaze moves on. She breathes. And somewhere in the trees above the clearing, a marsh crow lifts off with a sound like tearing cloth, startled by something moving through the dark. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that has been following the pack for 3 nights. Not the pack. Chapter 2. She had survived worse odds than this. She had crossed the Deadfin Flats alone in the belly of winter, with nothing but a gutting knife and 3 strips of dried meat. She had broken out of a Pale Court holding cell using a sharpened bone and an unlucky guard's moment of distraction. She had stood in front of the Iron Veil's council at 17 years old and told them, calmly, without blinking, exactly what she thought of their strategy. She had survived all of it. So why, she thought, pressed flat against the cold ground of a marsh clearing with 31 wolves breathing around her and one pair of pale gold eyes somewhere in the dark. Why does this feel different? The pack slept in the way wolves sleep, not deeply, not completely, always with some part of them still turned outward toward the world. Ears twitching at distant sounds. Nostrils pulling in slow, continuous drafts of information. Even in rest, they were a machine. Even in rest, they were dangerous. She kept her eyes at half-mast, the way the younger wolves did. Not closed. A wolf that closed its eyes fully in unfamiliar territory was either exhausted beyond caution or stupid beyond saving. She was neither. She watched Corvin settle 6 feet to her right, his massive tawny body curved like a breakwater against the cold. He was asleep within minutes. The beater's gift, the ability to drop into rest instantly, completely, and wake in the same motion as a striking snake. She filed that away. Don't be near Corvin when things go wrong. The younger wolves arranged themselves in loose clusters, tangled together for warmth the way littermates do. 2 of them made soft, unconscious sounds. Small huffs, tiny whimpers, the audio residue of whatever wolves dream about. She wondered, briefly, what they dreamed about. Probably not this, she thought. Probably not lying very still in the dark and counting their own heartbeats and wondering if the most dangerous wolf in 4 territories has noticed that one of the bodies in his pack has slightly the wrong bone structure through the left foreleg. She stopped wondering about the dreams. Draven had not settled. That was the thing. That was the specific, quiet, devastating thing that she had been tracking for the past 40 minutes while the rest of the pack descended into rest. He stood at the water's edge where he had stopped them. He had not moved more than 3 feet in any direction. He was not pacing. He was not prowling. He was doing something far more unsettling than either of those things. He was thinking. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, that particular stillness that wasn't the stillness of rest but the stillness of a mind working. The kind of stillness that a blade has just before it moves. How much does he know? She ran the calculation carefully, the way she'd been trained to, without emotion, without hope distorting the numbers. The paste was past its optimal window by 1 hour and 40 minutes. It hadn't failed yet. She could confirm that, because if it had failed she would already be dead, but it was degrading. The edges of her scent were bleeding through in increments too small for most wolves to detect. Most wolves. He heard a single wrong landing from 40 yards away in a running pack, she reminded herself. He is not most wolves. At the water's edge, Draven's head turned. Not toward her. Not yet. He turned toward the northern tree line, nostrils flaring in a slow, considered pull of air. Whatever he found there, he held it, tasted it, turned it over in whatever cognitive space an alpha used for things that didn't yet have names. Then he turned back, and took 1 step toward the pack. His moving. Every nerve in her body pulled taut. Stay still. Stay exactly as you are. Head down, ears relaxed, breathing slow. You are asleep. You are no one. You are just another tired wolf at the end of a long run. Draven moved through the sleeping pack with a careful, deliberate grace that made her stomach tighten. Not because it was threatening, though it was, but because of the specific quality of how he moved. He wasn't patrolling. An alpha patrolling his pack moves with authority, with the blunt confidence of ownership. He moves in straight lines. He moves like he already knows what he'll find. Draven was moving like a question. He paused near 2 of the younger wolves, barely more than yearlings, their grey and gold coats still carrying the softness of adolescence. He looked at them for a moment, not checking on them, comparing something. What is he comparing? Then he moved on. He stopped beside a lean female with a dark muzzle, one of the senior hunters, a wolf called RHYNN that she had identified on day 1 as someone to avoid. RHYNN was sharp-minded and perceptive even by pack standards. Draven looked at her too, for just a beat, and then moved on. He was getting closer. 4 wolves away. Then 3. Then 2. 68 heartbeats per minute. Too fast. Too fast. Still water. Cold stone. The bottom of the marsh. The dark under the dark. Nothing. You are nothing. You are. Draven stopped. 1 wolf away from her. He was standing beside the large dark male on her immediate left, a senior pack member, broad through the chest, who had been running directly ahead of her for 3 days. Draven looked at him for a long moment. She didn't breathe. Then Draven's gaze shifted and settled on her. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He simply looked at her the way a mathematician looks at a number that doesn't belong in a sequence, with that specific quality of attention that is more unsettling than any growl, any snarl, any display of teeth. Pure, cold recognition. Not of her. Not yet. But of the fact that something was wrong. He doesn't know what I am, she told herself. He knows something is wrong. That's different. That's manageable. I can work with something is wrong. She let out a long, slow breath through her nose, the way the yearlings breathed. She shifted her weight slightly, the unconscious fidget of a sleeping wolf adjusting to discomfort, and tucked her muzzle tighter against her forepaw. The performance of perfect innocence. She felt his gaze like a physical pressure, like a hand pressed flat against the back of her skull. Don't react. Reacting is confessing. A long moment passed. The fog moved through the clearing in slow, grey ribbons. Somewhere in the deeper marsh, a nightbird called once, a low, hollow note that dissolved into silence. Draven looked away. He turned and walked back toward the water. She let the breath out of her lungs in the most controlled exhale she had ever executed in her life. He doesn't know, she told herself. He suspects. There's a difference. Suspects means I still have time. Suspects means. Draven stopped at the water's edge. And without turning around, without looking back at her, he spoke. His voice was low, quiet, unhurried in the way that very dangerous things are often unhurried, because they already know the outcome. There is a sound in this clearing, he said, to no one in particular, to the dark water and the fog and the sleeping pack, that I can't place. Nobody stirred. Nobody responded. The pack slept on around her, oblivious. A rhythm, he continued, still not turning, that's slightly too controlled. A body that rests like it's been taught to rest, rather than simply resting. Her heart rate hit 84. Interesting, he said softly. And then he said nothing else. He stood at the water's edge until the first grey suggestion of pre-dawn light began to bleed through the fog. He stood there perfectly still, perfectly patient, perfectly aware. And she lay in the dark 6 feet behind him and did not move a single muscle and thought, with absolute clarity. 3 miles. I needed 3 more miles. When the pack began to stir at dawn, that gradual, rolling awakening of wolves coming back to the surface, stretching and shaking and pressing noses to the ground, Draven shifted. She had been warned about watching an alpha shift. The field reports called it cognitively destabilizing for non-pack members, which she had assumed was hyperbole. It was not hyperbole. The change moved through him like weather, fast, total, and indifferent to the violence of its own process. Bone and mass and form collapsing and rebuilding in the span of 3 hard breaths. And then a man stood at the water's edge, water beating on his skin in the cold morning air as if the marsh itself was trying to hold on to him. Corvin was already shifting beside him, and someone pressed a heavy cloak into Draven's hands without being asked. A well-practiced exchange, the machinery of a pack that had been running together for a long time. Draven rolled his shoulders once, pulled the cloak around himself, and turned to face the pack. His eyes swept the clearing. When they reached her, still in wolf form, still tucked small and still among the yearlings, they stopped. Just for a half second. Just long enough. He looked at her the way a man looks at a locked door he fully intends to open. Then he looked away, and said to Corvin in that same quiet, unhurried voice, "We run the eastern route today." Corvin's head turned slightly. The eastern route adds 2 miles. I know. The pack is already tired from. The eastern route, Draven said again, with exactly the same inflection, and Corvin went silent. She understood, with a cold and perfect clarity, what the eastern route meant. The eastern border, the unmanned scrubland crossing she had been aiming for, the exit she had been running toward for 3 days, was 2 miles further east. He wasn't taking them east to cover more ground. He was taking them east to cut off the only way out. He doesn't know what I am, she thought again. The thought felt thinner now, less convincing. But he knows I'm running towards something. And he just put himself between me and it. Around her, the pack began to form up. Wolves shaking out their coats, pressing flanks together, finding their places in the formation with the ease of long habit. She rose with them. She took her place in the middle of the formation. She kept her tail angle right, her ears right, her gait right. And she watched the back of Draven's silver-threaded head, 40 yards ahead of her, as the pack moved out into the grey dawn. 2 miles, she thought. His 2 miles ahead of me in a race I didn't know I was running. And he hasn't even looked back. Chapter 3. The eastern route was beautiful, in the way that traps are sometimes beautiful. The marsh thinned gradually as they ran, the black water retreating, the cypress giving way to stands of pale birch, their white bark luminous in the grey morning light. The ground firmed underfoot, bog-soft earth hardening to packed clay and then to gravel and then to the kind of frostbitten ground that rang like a struck bell under 32 sets of paws. Clean air replaced the thick, vegetable dark of the wetlands. Cold and sharp, carrying the scent of open scrubland, dry grass, frozen earth, the distant mineral bite of the stone flats beyond the border. She could smell the crossing from here. She could smell freedom from here. It was, she estimated, less than a mile ahead. It was also, she estimated, completely and utterly unreachable. He restructured the formation at the second rest. She turned the detail over in her mind as she ran, worrying at it the way a tongue worries at a split lip. He had done it casually, a few quiet words to Corvin, a shift in the running order that looked like routine pack management. The kind of thing an alpha might do for any number of legitimate reasons. Adjusting for terrain, redistributing the pace load among tired legs, giving the yearlings a break from the front exposure. Entirely reasonable, except that the net result, the specific, surgical net result, was that she was no longer tucked in the middle of the formation. She was at the back, ringed on three sides by the pack's most senior hunters. And Draven himself, who had been running point for 3 days without variation, was now running rear guard. Directly behind her. His not just cutting off the exit, she thought, keeping her gait metronome steady, keeping every muscle in her body performing the role it had been assigned. His herding me toward it. He wants to see what I do when I get close. She knew what a good field agent would do. A good field agent would not go for the crossing. A good field agent would recognize the trap for what it was, abandon the exit strategy, and fold back into the pack for another day, wait for a new opportunity, a new route, a new gap in the pattern. The problem was the pace. She ran a quiet calculation in the back of her mind while the front of her mind kept her paws moving, kept her tail angle right, kept her breathing pack-matched and unremarkable. The marshbind paste had a 5-hour window of full efficacy, a degradation period of approximately 2 hours after that, during which the masking effect became progressively less reliable. And after that, it failed. She had mixed it at midnight. It was now, by her internal count, somewhere past the 8-hour mark. She was not running on a pace that was degrading. She was running on a pace that had already failed. She just didn't know by how much. How long, she thought, has he been able to smell me? The question sat in her chest like a swallowed stone. An hour. 2. Since the second rest. Since before the second rest. She thought about the way he had stood at the water's edge in the pre-dawn light, perfectly still, facing away from the pack. The way he had said, to no one, to the fog, to the dark water, "There is a sound in this clearing that I can't place. Not a smell. A sound." He had found the sound before the paste failed. Which meant he had known something was wrong even when the masking was still working. Which meant that when the paste finally gave out, he already had 2 reasons. The birch trees fell away on either side. The ground opened up. Ahead, perhaps 800 yards distant, the terrain changed, the frostbitten clay giving way to the pale, dry expanse of the scrublands, flat and featureless and empty, stretching to the horizon under a steel-gray sky. The border. The crossing. 800 yards. She felt the response in her body before she could stop it, a tightening through the shoulders, a microsecond adjustment in her gait, the involuntary lean forward of a body that has been aiming at something for 3 days and can finally see it. She corrected instantly. Too late. Behind her, not breaking stride, not making a sound, Draven spoke. Interesting. 1 word. The same word he had used at the water's edge in the dark. Quiet and precise, and falling through the air like a stone through still water. The pack kept running. She kept running. Don't react. Reacting is confessing. The way your left shoulder just changed, he said, still behind her, still unhurried, when the scrubland came into view. That's not a wolf's response to open terrain. Her heart rate hit 91. Wolves don't tighten through the shoulder when they see a clear run. They open through it. They expand. 93. But a person who has been running toward a specific point and suddenly sees it, a person leans forward. Just slightly. Just for a fraction of a second. You leaned forward. The pack was slowing. She felt it before she saw it, the formation compressing, the pace dropping, that collective deceleration that happened when an alpha's intent moved through the bond and every wolf responded without being told. The senior hunters on her flanks drew slightly closer. Not aggressively. Just closer. She had perhaps 10 seconds before the formation locked around her completely. She ran the options fast and cold. Going for the crossing, 800 yards of open ground with 32 wolves between her and it, and the fastest among them already repositioned to her flanks. She'd cover maybe 200 yards before they brought her down. Less. Shifting now, here, mid-run, the element of surprise would last approximately 1 second before the pack responded. She'd have her daggers, but she'd be standing in the middle of a formation that had just closed around her, with no cover, no elevation, and no route. Continuing to perform, hold the wolf form, hold the gate, deny everything. Let him voice his suspicion to the open air and refuse to confirm it. How long does that last? She thought. How long before he stops asking questions with words and starts asking them with teeth? 7 seconds. Every option ends the same way, she realized. Every option ends with me cornered. The only question is whether I choose how it starts. She stopped running. It happened cleanly. 1 stride, 2 strides, a controlled deceleration, and she was standing still in the middle of the formation as the pack slowed and stopped around her and the scrubland border sat 800 yards away and completely out of reach. Draven stopped behind her. The pack settled into a loose ring. Not tight enough to be a cage. Not loose enough to be anything else. She stood in the center of it, still in wolf form, still wearing the brown-gray coat and the correct tail angle and the earned posture of something that belonged here. Draven walked forward. He moved through the gap between 2 of the senior hunters and came to stand 8 feet in front of her, and she saw him properly for the first time at close range in full daylight. The cold geometry of him, the winter gold eyes, the mouth that had clearly decided something already and was simply waiting for the rest of the situation to catch up. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he crouched down. Not a threatening posture. Not an aggressive one. He brought himself level with her, elbows on his knees, and looked at her the way a man looks at something he has already named and is simply waiting for to admit its own name. The paste was clever, he said. Bog iron clay and night root. I haven't smelled that combination in a long time. Whoever taught you that recipe knew what they were doing. She held very still. But night root breaks down in moving water. You crossed 6 channels last night. By the 3rd crossing, it was giving you maybe 60% coverage. He tilted his head. By the 5th, it was 40. By the time you landed wrong off that cypress, a brief pause, it was nothing. The fog of her breath hung between them in the cold air. I've known since the cypress, he said quietly, that you weren't a wolf. A beat. What I don't know yet, he said, is what you are. He held her gaze, pale gold, winter gold, blade gold, steady and patient and completely without performance. So I'm going to ask you once, he said. And only once. Shift. 4-3 heartbeats. Nothing happened. The pack waited. The scrubland border sat 800 yards away in the grey morning light. The frostbitten ground was hard and cold beneath her paws. Then she shifted. Not because he asked. I know. Draven turned back to her. And for the first time since he had crouched down in front of her wolf form and told her quietly that he had known since the cypress. He looked at her like she was not a problem to be solved. He looked at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't finished asking yet. They are not following my pack, he said. It wasn't a question. No, she said. They are following you. She held his gaze. Yes. The discordant horn sounded again, closer this time, and with harmonics beneath it that pressed against the ears like something trying to get inside. Draven looked at her for one long, measuring moment. Then he said, Run. Chapter 4. He said run. She ran. But not toward the scrubland border. Not toward the crossing she had spent 3 days aiming for. That route was gone. She had accepted that the moment the pale court horn cut through the grey morning air and Draven's eyes had moved from her face to the tree line and back again with that specific quality of a man rapidly rearranging his priorities. She ran because he said to, and she ran in the direction he indicated with a single tilt of his head, and she was deeply, privately furious about both of those things. This is not how this was supposed to go, she thought, her boots hitting the frost-hard ground in long, even strides, the birch trees blurring past on either side. 3 days of careful work. 3 days of perfect performance. And now I'm running deeper into Ashveil territory at the instruction of the one man I was specifically told not to interact with. Behind her, the pack moved like weather, fast and collective and inevitable. Ahead, Draven ran. Even in human form, even without the wolf's frame, he was extraordinary to watch. There was an efficiency to the way he moved that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with something older, the kind of physical intelligence that lives in the body rather than the mind, that makes every motion exactly as large as it needs to be and not a fraction larger. She hated that she noticed. She filed the noticing away under irrelevant and kept running. The pale court horn sounded a third time. Closer. The harmonics beneath it were worse at close range, a lead, sliding dissonance that seemed to find the space behind the eyes and press. She had been briefed on it. She had been told it was unpleasant. The briefing had undersold it considerably. Around her, the wolves were responding to it in the way that prey animals respond to a predator's call. Not with fear, exactly, but with a sharpening, a tightening, an instinctive redistribution of attention. Even Corvin's jaw had a new set to it. Whatever the pale court was, the Ashveil Pack did not like it. That, at least, was consistent with everything she'd been told. They broke from the birch trees onto a wide stone shelf, a flat expanse of dark granite jutting from the hillside like a blade, slick with frost and patched with ice where the meltwater had pooled and frozen overnight. Draven stopped at the far edge of it. The pack stopped behind him. She stopped. She was breathing hard, not from the run. She was conditioned well past the point where a run like this would wind her, but from the particular exertion of running while thinking, which was its own kind of labor. Draven turned. He looked past the pack, back toward the birch trees, and she watched him count something, sounds, scents, distances, behind his eyes. Then he looked at Corvin, and something passed between them that wasn't words and didn't need to be. Corvin turned to the pack. Formation hold. Perimeter spread. Nothing crosses this shelf that we don't invite. The wolves moved outward, smooth and practiced, placing themselves at intervals around the stone shelf's edges with the coordinated ease of a unit that had run this particular drill many times before, which left the center of the shelf empty, which left her standing in the middle of it, which left Draven walking toward her. Here it is, she thought. Here is the part one couldn't plan for. She kept the blades in her hands. Not raised, she wasn't suicidal, but present. The weight of them was grounding. The weight of them reminded her of what she was. He stopped 6 feet away, close enough that she could see the frost melt on his shoulders from the run, the slight elevation of his chest, barely, almost imperceptibly faster than resting, and the way the winter light caught his eyes and turned them from gold to something closer to white. He looked at her blades, then at her face. "Your iron veil," he said. "Not a question." "The stitching is gone," she said. "The stitching is faded," he said. "That's different. Gone means removed. Faded means worn. You've been wearing that leather for a long time." She said nothing. "Iron Veil disbanded 8 months ago," he said. The Pale Court moved through their 3 southern strongholds in a single night. There were no survivors recorded. The frost was cold beneath her boots. Somewhere behind her, one of the perimeter wolves made a low, warning sound. Something moving in the tree line. "Recorded," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Minute, controlled. "But there. How many got out?" "Enough," she said. "How many is enough?" She looked at him steadily. "Enough to matter." He held her gaze for a moment. Then, with a movement so casual it took her half a second to track, he reached out and took hold of her right wrist. Not violently. Not with the crushing grip of a man asserting dominance. Just a hand closing around her wrist with a certainty that suggested he had decided to do it and had not entertained the possibility that she would object. She objected. The blade in her left hand came up in a tight arc, not for the throat, not yet, not until she knew the tactical shape of this. And she stepped into him rather than back, closing the distance so the right-hand blade was suddenly at an angle that made holding her wrist a liability rather than an advantage. He released her wrist. Not because she'd forced him to. She was clear-eyed enough to know that. He released it because he had felt the geometry shift and made a choice. And the choice was to let go and reassess rather than escalate into a grapple he hadn't planned for. That told her something. His not fighting by reflex, she thought, circling left, keeping the blades in the space between them. His fighting by decision. Every motion is chosen. That's harder to predict than reflex. That's actually harder to predict. Draven watched her circle with those winter gold eyes and did not move. He stood in the center of the frost-slicked granite shelf and tracked her movement the way a fixed point tracks something orbiting around it. Without effort, without adjustment, simply by being still. "You don't want to fight me," he said. "I don't want to," she agreed. "That doesn't mean I won't." On a frost-slicked shelf with 30 wolves on the perimeter and a pale court hunting party less than a mile behind you. "I've fought in worse conditions." "I believe you," he said, and the specific quality of how he said it, without irony, without condescension, with something that landed uncomfortably close to genuine, made her jaw tighten. "Don't do that," she said. "Do what?" "Believe me like it means something. You don't know me." "No," he said. "But I've been watching you run for 3 days." He tilted his head slightly. "I know how you move when you're tired. I know how you move when you're afraid, because you move exactly the same way you move when you're not afraid, and that is its own kind of information. I know that you checked the yearlings twice last night when you thought no one was watching and adjusted their position so the wind wouldn't hit them directly." She kept her face still. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "It wasn't part of the performance. It didn't mean anything. It meant you have a conscience," he said. "That's not nothing." The pale court horn sounded again, 4 sharp blasts this time, a different pattern, and Corvin's head came up sharply across the shelf. She used it. The moment Draven's attention fractured, a half-second, barely, she moved. Low and fast across the frost-slit stone, using the ice patches the way she'd been trained to use terrain, letting the slickness accelerate her rather than fighting it, closing the distance between them in the time it took him to bring his focus back. She went for the shoulder. A controlled strike, iron core blade angled for the meat of the joint, deep enough to impede, not deep enough to kill. She needed him functional. She needed him answering questions, not bleeding out on a granite shelf in the middle of his own territory. The blade connected. Iron-kissed skin. He made a sound, short and sharp and involuntary, the specific sound of pain that a body produces before the mind has time to suppress it. His left arm dropped. She was already moving past him, spinning to put open ground between them, getting her back to the shelf's edge. She stood with both blades up and her breathing elevated and the iron-dark line of the wound visible on his shoulder where the leather had parted. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. And he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a reassuring smile. It was the kind of smile that a storm would produce if a storm had a face. Something vast and cold and entirely unintimidated, wearing amusement the way a cliff face wears weather. "Iron core," he said, and his voice was completely level, on a wolf who hasn't shifted. "Contingency," she said. "You came into my pack carrying iron core blades as a contingency. I came into your pack carrying iron core blades because I am not an idiot." He rolled his shoulder once, slowly, testing the wound. It was healing. She could see that, but slower than silver would allow and with a quality of reluctance that iron wounds had on shifters, a sullenness to the tissue that resisted the knitting. "That's going to be inconvenient," he said, without particular resentment. "Good," she said. He looked at her across the frost-slicked granite with that winter-gold gaze, and she looked back at him with both blades still raised, and for a moment the only sounds were the distant harmonics of the pale court horn and the soft percussion of the wind across the stone shelf and the specific quality of silence that exists between two people who are each trying to take the measure of something they haven't seen before. "You're not going to run," he said. "The perimeter is covered." "That's not why." She didn't answer. "You stopped running the moment you heard the horn," he said. "Before I said anything. You'd already made the calculation." "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." He took a slow step toward her. She held her ground. "You can't outrun the pale court in open terrain. They are faster than wolves on flat ground, and they track by something older than scent." Another step. "You've been running from them for how long? Weeks? Months?" She said nothing. The blades stayed up. "Long enough," he said, answering himself, "to know that running doesn't work. Long enough to have tried everything you know how to try and still be running." He stopped 4 feet away. The wound on his shoulder had slowed its bleeding but not stopped. The iron was doing its patient, sullen work. He didn't appear to care. "You ran into my pack," he said slowly, working through it as he spoke, "not because you were trying to cross my territory." She kept her face still. "You ran into my pack," he said, "because 32 Ashveil wolves are harder to track through than open ground. Because we mask everything around us. Because the pale court might follow your scent to the edge of our territory and then..." He paused. "And then lose it." Because there is no individual sent inside an Ashveil Pack formation. There is only pack. The wind moved across the stone shelf. You weren't crossing my territory, he said. You were using it as cover. She lowered the blades. Not all the way. Not as surrender. An inch. 2. Enough to be honest. I needed 3 days, she said. 3 days inside the formation and they would have lost the trail completely. The pale court can't sustain a cold track for more than 7 to 2 hours. After that She stopped. After that the what? He said. She looked at him. After that the thing they are carrying loses potency, she said. The thing they took from me. A beat fell between them, weighted in particular. What did they take from you? He said. From the tree line, much closer now, no more than 400 yards, the pale court horn sounded again. And this time it was not alone. It was answered. From the west. From the north. From 2 points simultaneously, the discordant harmonics layering over each other into something that pressed against thought itself, that made the air feel thin and the stone underfoot feel unreliable. They had found the shelf. They had found her. Corvin's voice came from the perimeter, low and hard. Contact. Northwest. 30 seconds. Draven did not look away from her. What? He said again, quiet and absolute. Did they take from you? She met his wintergold eyes. And said the thing she had not said to anyone in 8 months. The thing she had been running with like a stone in her chest, through marshes and over borders and through 3 days of perfect performance inside a wolf pack that would have killed her without hesitation if it had known what she carried. My brother, she said. They took my brother. The first shadow crossed the tree line. Long wrong-shaped. Moving in the specific way that pale court hunters moved. Not like predators, not like anything natural, but like the idea of movement given a body it didn't quite fit. Draven looked at it. Then he looked at her. And he held out his hand. Not for the blades. Just open. Offered. The gesture of a man making a decision he fully intends to follow through on. Stay close, he said. And try not to stab me again. She looked at his hand for 1 second. 2. I make no promises, she said. But she stepped forward. And the shelf exploded into motion. Chapter 5. The first hunter cleared the tree line. She had been briefed on the pale court. She had studied the field reports, the sketched illustrations, the fragmented testimonies of people who had seen them and retained enough coherence afterward to put words to it. She had believed she was prepared. She was not prepared. They were tall, wrong tall. The kind of height that suggested the proportions had been arrived at by a different set of calculations than the ones nature used. 7 feet, perhaps more. Robed in something that wasn't quite fabric, that moved a half-second behind the body wearing it, as if it was always catching up. Their faces were covered. She was profoundly grateful for that. What she could see was the hands. Long-fingered, pale as birch bark. Holding, between them, a length of something dark and taut that hummed at a frequency just below hearing, that pressed against the back of the teeth. 3 of them at the northwest edge of the shelf. 2 more emerging from the tree line to the north. 5. She counted. 5 is a retrieval party. 5 means they are not here to destroy. 5 means they want me back. The Ashveil wolves did not retreat. She registered that with a portion of her mind even as the rest of it was running threat assessments and exit calculations. 31 wolves holding perimeter on a frost-slick granite shelf, facing down 5 pale court hunters, and not a single one of them broke the line. Not a single one stepped back. The formation tightened, if anything, bodies pressing closer, the pack bond pulling them together in the specific way it did when an Ashveil wolf understood that what was coming was going to require everything. They've faced these things before, she realized. They know what this is. They are still here. She filed that away beside the yearlings in the wind memory and tried not to examine what the filing meant. Draven stood 4 feet ahead of her. He had not shifted. That surprised her. The wolf form was faster, stronger, better armored against physical damage. A straightforward calculation should have produced a shift by now. But he stood in human form, with the iron wound on his shoulder still doing its slow, reluctant work, and he watched the pale court hunters cross onto the stone shelf with an expression that had a specific quality she had not seen on him before. Not calculation. Not the patient, architectural threat assessment she had watched him perform for 3 days. Anger. Controlled to the point of being nearly invisible. Compressed into something dense and cold and structural, the way extreme pressure compresses carbon. But it was there, in the set of his jaw, in the quality of his stillness. The pale court hunters stopped 20 feet away. A silence fell that had a texture to it. Then the central figure, the tallest, the one slightly forward of the others, raised one long pale hand and pointed at her. I know, she thought. I know. I'm aware. She kept both blades up. Iron core. Whatever good they would do against something that moved like a thought and tracked like a tide. They work on pale court tissue, her instructor's voice said, from somewhere in the archive of her training. Not the way they work on shifters. Different mechanism. But they work. How well? She had asked. Well enough to make them consider whether you're worth the trouble. Well enough wasn't the comfort it was probably intended to be. Beside her, Draven spoke. Not loudly. Not with the performed authority of a man who needed volume to establish presence. Simply clearly, the way a boundary is simply clear. You are standing on Ashveil stone, he said. You crossed marked territory without petition, without invitation, without acknowledgement of claim. The central figure's hand stayed extended, pointing past him at her. It did not lower. I'll take that as a declaration, Draven said. He looked back over his shoulder. At her. Get behind me, he said. No, she said. That wasn't a request. I know what it was. His jaw tightened. She could see it from here, the specific flexion of a man exercising patience he did not particularly feel. Your iron veil. You know what the pale court does to people it retrieves. Yes. Then get behind me. I fight my own battles. Not on my territory, he said. On my territory, you fight beside me or you get behind me. Those are the options available to you. She looked at him. She looked at the 5 pale court hunters 20 feet away, with their wrong-tall bodies and their humming dark cords and their one extended pale finger pointing at her chest. She looked at him again. Beside, she said. Not behind. Something crossed his expression. Too fast to name, too controlled to read. Fine, he said, and turned back to the pale court. What happened next happened fast. The central figure dropped its hand, and the 2 flanking hunters moved. They moved in the pale court way, that wrong motion, that half-second lag between intent and execution that somehow resulted in covering ground faster than the eye could track, as if they were borrowing time from somewhere else and spending it here. The Ashveil wolves hit them before they reached the center of the shelf. It was not a clean engagement. Nothing about fighting pale court hunters was clean. She knew that from the reports, confirmed it now in the specific chaos of bodies and sound and that pressing, toothaking hum rising in frequency as the dark chords came into play. 2 wolves went down, not dead, she assessed quickly, incapacitated, which was consistent with a retrieval party that needed the opposition subdued rather than destroyed. She moved left. The flanking hunter on the left had broken through the wolf line and was crossing the shelf toward her with that wrong fast motion, one hand extended, the dark cord spinning out from between its fingers like something alive. She went low. Every instinct said go low against something that tall, because tall things are built for reach and reach requires a certain angle that low bodies deny. She dropped under the cord's arc, felt the hum of it pass over her head close enough to feel in her back teeth, came up inside the hunter's reach with the right-hand blade driving for the joint where the too long arm met the too wide shoulder. Iron connected. The sound the hunter made was not a sound she wanted to hear again. It recoiled, a full-body recoil, that wrong-tall frame folding backward in a motion that had too many joints in it, and she used the space to disengage, spinning back, putting ground between them. Iron works, she confirmed, mostly to herself. I see that, Draven said, somewhere to her right, and there was something in his voice that she did not have time to analyze. The central figure had not moved. It stood at the edge of the shelf, 20 feet away, and watched the engagement with that covered face turned toward her specifically, tracking her through the chaos of wolves and hunters with a fixed attention that felt like weight. It's not fighting, she thought, circling. It's watching. It's waiting for something. It's waiting for me to be separated from him. The realization landed cleanly. The 2 flanking hunters were not trying to retrieve her. They were trying to drive a gap between her and Draven, separate her from the pack's perimeter, expose her on open ground where the central figure could. Left, Draven said. She was already moving left, and the cord that had been aimed at the space she'd been standing in snapped against the granite shelf where her feet had been and left a line of frostburned stone. She and Draven ended up back to back. She registered it a half-second after it happened, his back against her shoulder blades, warm through the leather, solid in the way that things are solid when they have decided to be immovable. The iron wound on his shoulder was at her eye level, and she could see it still working against his healing, still sullen and slow. 3 on the perimeter, he said. Low. 4, huh? 2 free on the shelf, she said back. The central one hasn't engaged. It won't, he said. It's the anchor. The others are the net. They are trying to separate us. Yes. So we don't separate. No. Back to back on the frost-slit granite, blades up, the pale court net tightening around them and the wolves holding the perimeter at cost. She registered, with the part of her that always kept accounting even in the middle of chaos, that this was not a position she had planned for. She had not planned for his back against hers. She had not planned for it to feel like something she could hold a line against. Irrelevant, she told herself. Completely irrelevant. The net closed. Both free hunters moved simultaneously. That wrong fast motion, the dark cords spinning out, the hum rising to a frequency that was doing something unpleasant to her vision at the edges. Draven moved first. Not away from her. He turned, hard and fast, pressing his shoulder into hers to spin them both, using her as a pivot point with a physical confidence that assumed her cooperation before she'd agreed to it. And she felt the alpha's power come off him like a change in air pressure. Not words. Not the directed command she had been briefed on. Just power, radiating outward in a wave she felt in her chest cavity, in the soles of her feet, in the particular density of the air against her skin. The wolves on the perimeter steadied. The 2 free hunters staggered, a half step back, that wrong-tall frame absorbing the pressure badly, the dark cords losing their rhythm for just a moment. Just a moment. Draven used it. He crossed the shelf in 4 strides and hit the right-hand hunter with a force that had nothing to do with human physics. The alpha's strength, even in human form, even carrying an iron wound, and the hunter went back off the edge of the shelf and into the frostbitten clay below with a sound that ended the engagement on that side. 1 free hunter left. She was already on it. She took it down with a combination she had drilled until her muscles knew it without her. Low entry, iron blade to the cord arm, disengage. High entry, iron blade to the junction of neck and shoulder, disengage, and 1 flat-handed strike to the center of the chest that her instructor had told her was specific to pale court physiology and that she had taken on faith until this exact moment. It worked. The hunter went down. She stood over it, breathing hard, both blades still in her hands, and did a rapid perimeter check. The 3 wolves who had gone down were being attended to by packmates, alive, as she'd assessed, working their way back to consciousness. The perimeter had held. The hunters on the outside of the pack's line were gone. She turned a full circle. The 5 pale court hunters were either down or retreated. The central figure, the anchor, was gone. No sign of it at the tree line, no movement in the birch trees, nothing. They'll regroup, she thought. They always regroup. But not immediately. Not within the hour. She lowered her blades. The shelf was quiet except for the wind and the soft sounds of the injured wolves and the particular quality of silence that settles after violence like snow over disturbed ground. Draven stood at the far edge of the shelf. He turned to look at her. His expression had changed again. The anger was still there, compressed, structural, but something had been added to it. Something that sat alongside the anger the way iron sits alongside cold. She recognized it belatedly as assessment. Deep, thorough, personal assessment. How, he said, did you know the chest strike? Briefing, she said. Nobody outside the pale court knows the chest strike. Someone did once, she said. Someone wrote it down. And the Iron Veil had that document. The Iron Veil had a lot of things, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the shelf toward her, and she watched him come, and she kept the blades at a neutral angle because she was not going to be the one who blinked first on a day that had already cost her this much. He stopped 3 feet away. Tell me your name, he said. You already know my name, she said. You said it on the water, before I shifted. You were in my pack for 3 days, he said. I had time to investigate. The Iron Veil's known operatives list is not classified, it's just difficult to find. A beat. Your file is interesting. I'm sure it is. It doesn't mention the Pale Court connection. It wouldn't. It doesn't mention your brother. The wind crossed the shelf. Somewhere in the birch trees a branch cracked under its own frost weight and fell. No, she said. It wouldn't mention that either. He looked at her with those wintergold eyes from 3 feet away, and she looked back at him, and the iron wound on his shoulder was her doing, and she was aware of that with a specificity she couldn't entirely account for. Seren, he said. Her name, in his voice, with that particular quality, not a test, not a weapon. Just a word, placed carefully. She didn't answer. Answering felt like conceding something she hadn't agreed to concede. I'm going to ask you something, he said, and I need an honest answer. I don't owe you honesty. No, he said. You don't. I'm asking anyway. She waited. How long do we have before they regroup? She blinked. That was not the question she had been bracing for. 2 hours, she said after a moment. Maybe 3 if the anchor was damaged in the retreat. Pale court retrieval parties don't engage a second time without a full formation. And a full formation is how many? 12. Minimum. He nodded once, processing. We need to move, he said. The stronghold is 4 miles. We can be inside the walls before they regroup. I'm not going to your stronghold. You have a better option. She looked at the tree line. She looked at the scrubland border, visible in the far distance, flat and pale and completely exposed. Not currently, she said. Then we move. He turned toward the pack. Corvin. My king. Can Aldrich run? He'll run, Corvin said, with the tone of a man who had already had the conversation with the wolf in question and received a stubborn answer. Good. Formation close. No stragglers. He turned back to her. Stay in the formation. I'm not doing that again, she said. Not to hide you, he said. To protect you. She opened her mouth. She closed it. The pale court anchor tracks by resonance, he said quietly, so that only she could hear it. Individual resonance. A single body's specific frequency. Inside a pack formation, the frequencies layer and the individual signal disappears. I know that, she said. That's why I know why you ran into my pack, he said. I worked that out on the shelf. I'm not angry about it. She studied his face, looking for the lie in it. There wasn't one. You should be, she said. Probably, he agreed. I'll schedule it for later. She almost made the mistake of a small, involuntary sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. She caught it in time. Fine, she said. Formation. He nodded. He turned to lead the pack back into the birch trees, toward the stronghold 4 miles distant, and she fell into step 3 lengths behind him with her blades sheathed and the iron wound on his shoulder still visible above the collar of his cloak and the pale quartz resonance pressing faintly against the back of her teeth like a headache that hadn't decided to arrive yet. And then he stopped, and she felt it before she understood it. A pressure, sudden and total and coming from everywhere at once, pressing against the inside of her skull like a sound at a frequency just above the range of hearing. Like something vast turning its attention to the space she occupied. Like a hand pressing flat against a door. The Alpha Decree. Not directed. Not shaped into words. Just released. A wave of pure Alpha dominance rolling outward from Draven in every direction. The kind of power that dropped wolves to their knees without a word. That rewrote the nervous system's understanding of the social order in a single pulse. The pack dropped. Every wolf on the shelf. 31 wolves, senior hunters and yearlings alike. Corvin with his battering ram jaw. Folded at the knees. Not painfully. The decree didn't hurt pack members. It simply made standing feel like the wrong answer to a question the body suddenly very much wanted to answer correctly. She felt it hit her like a wave. She felt her knees begin to bend. And then, with every piece of training she had ever received, with every hour of conditioning and every scar and every night she had spent learning to locate the place in herself that nothing external could reach, she pushed back. It was not elegant. It was not effortless. It was the single most physically demanding thing she had done in a day that had already contained running and combat and iron wounds and pale court hunters. And it cost her in a way she would be paying for later in the specific currency of exhaustion. But her knees straightened. She stood. Draven turned around. He looked at her, standing, upright, blades undrawn, breathing controlled. And something happened in his expression that she had not seen there before and did not have a name for. The pack was still down. 31 wolves on bent knees, heads lowered, waiting for the decree to lift. He was looking only at her. That, he said, very quietly, is not possible. Apparently it is, she said. Her voice came out steady. Barely. No human can resist the decree. I'm aware of the conventional wisdom. It's not conventional wisdom, it's, he stopped. His eyes moved across her face with a new quality, not the threat assessment, not the anger, not the patient architectural patience she had been watching for 3 days. Something rawer than any of those. What are you? She held his gaze. Someone who has spent a long time, she said, making sure that nothing can make me kneel. The wind crossed the shelf. The pack waited. Draven looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. Then he lifted the decree. The wolves rose around her, shaking themselves, finding their feet. And Draven turned and walked into the birch trees without another word. And she stood on the frost-slipped granite shelf in the grey morning light and felt the last resonance of the Alpha's power dissolving from her bones like ice melt. What are you? She looked down at her hands. At the iron-dark stain on her right blade from his shoulder. At the faint tremor in her fingers that she would absolutely not be acknowledging. I don't know yet, she thought. But I'm starting to think he might. End of chapter 5. She resisted the one thing no one resists. And now he knows she's not just Iron Veil. Not just a warrior. Not just a woman running from the Pale Court with a stolen secret and a missing brother. She's something else entirely. And in chapter 6, the thing she's been hiding inside that resistance, the truth behind why the Pale Court wants her back so badly, is finally going to surface. Comment below. Tell me, did you feel that decree hit you too? Because I felt it in my chest. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs a story that doesn't let go. I'll see you in the dark. Chapter 6. The stronghold appeared through the birch trees like a held breath finally released. She had seen sketches of it, rough intelligence drawings made from distance observation, the kind of illustration that captures proportion and position but never quite captures weight. The sketches had shown a structure built into the volcanic ridge. Walls of dark stone. A single gate of iron-banded timber. Functional. Defensible. Unremarkable. The sketches had been wrong about the weight. It sat against the ridge the way something ancient sits, not built so much as arrived at, as if the mountain had been working toward this shape for a very long time and the stone walls were simply the conclusion it had reached. Dark basalt, heat-fused at the joints, rising 40 feet from the frozen ground. Towers at each corner that were not decorative. A gate that was not timber. Iron. All iron. She felt it from 20 feet away, that faint, sourceless pressure that iron exerted on the part of her that she did not discuss in field reports or operational briefings. Not pain. Not quite. More like the way a tuning fork responds to a matching frequency, a recognition, involuntary and inconvenient. Of course it's iron, she thought. Of course it is. The pack entered through the gate in formation, the iron-banded doors swinging inward at Corvin's signal. The courtyard beyond was wide and dark-stoned and occupied by a handful of wolves in human form who registered the party's return with the specific alertness of people who had been waiting and managing their worry about it. 2 of them moved immediately toward the wolves who had gone down on the shelf, Aldrich, the broad-chested senior hunter, and a lean gray-coated female whose name she hadn't learned. Medical attention, or whatever the pack equivalent was. Efficient. Practiced. She stood in the middle of the courtyard and watched and kept both hands visible and her blades sheathed and her face in the expression that she used for situations where she needed to project calm she did not feel. Draven stopped beside her. Not close. 4 feet. The same distance he had maintained since the shelf. Close enough for a controlled engagement. Far enough to be a choice rather than proximity. The south tower has a room, he said. Warm. Lockable from the inside. She looked at him. Lockable from the inside, she repeated. You're not a prisoner. I'm inside your walls. You walked in, he said. The gate is still open. She turned and looked at the gate. It was still open. The grey morning light came through it in a long flat shaft, illuminating the frostbitten ground of the approach and the birch trees beyond. Technically, nothing was stopping her. Technically. The anchor will have reset by nightfall, she said. If I'm outside these walls. You're inside iron, he said. The anchor can't read resonance through solid iron. That's why we built it. She absorbed that. You built your entire stronghold out of iron, she said, to block Pale Court tracking. We built it out of iron, he said, because we have been dealing with Pale Court incursions for 11 years and we learned what works. 11 years. She filed that away. The Iron Veil's records only went back 7 years on Ashveil Pale Court contact. 4 years of conflict that had never made it into any intelligence document she had ever read. What else didn't make it into the documents? South Tower, he said again. Rest. We talk when you're ready. We talk now, she said. He looked at her steadily. You've been running for at least 3 days inside my pack, and before that however long on your own. You're carrying an iron wound on your right arm. I'm not. Where the cord clipped you on the shelf during the second engagement. Left side. You didn't show it, but you favored the right for the last half-mile. She stopped. She looked down at her left forearm. The pale court cord had caught her. She had registered it as superficial in the moment, filed it under deal with later, kept moving. But he was right. The skin where it had made contact was pale and cold-looking in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature, and the fingers of her left hand had a slight stiffness to them that she had been compensating for without acknowledging. Cord contact. Mild resonance burn. Unpleasant. Not dangerous if treated. Not dangerous if treated soon. South Tower, she said. Something in his expression, almost nothing, barely a degree, eased. Corvin will show you. He turned toward the main hall. Draven, she said. He stopped. He turned back with a quality of patience that was starting to feel less like control and more like something genuine, and she wasn't sure which version she found more difficult to manage. Thank you, she said. For the shelf. He looked at her for a moment. You did most of it, he said. I know, she said. I'm thanking you for the rest. He held her gaze for 1 beat, 2. Then he walked into the main hall without another word, and she stood in the cold courtyard with Corvin's measuring eyes on her and the iron walls pressing their quiet recognition against her skin, and thought, this is not how this was supposed to go. The South Tower room was warm. A fire in a deep iron grate. A narrow bed with heavy wool blankets. A basin of water, still steaming faintly, with cloth beside it and a small clay pot of something that smelled like bog balm and pine resin and at least one other component she recognized as specific to resonance burn treatment. She stood in the doorway for a moment. He had this prepared, she thought, before we got back. Someone prepared this before we arrived. Which meant either he had sent word ahead by some means she hadn't tracked, or this room was maintained in a state of readiness as a matter of general practice, or he had known, on some level, that he was bringing someone back. She stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind her. It locked from the inside. A solid iron bolt, well-made and well-maintained, sliding home with a sound like a decision. She sat on the edge of the bed and attended to the cord burn with the methodical efficiency of someone who had patched themselves up in worse conditions than this, and tried to think clearly, and found that thinking clearly was more difficult than it should have been. Not because of the burn. Not because of the exhaustion, which was considerable. Because of the question she had been running from for longer than she had been running from the pale court. The question Draven was going to ask. The question she was going to have to answer. She had slept 2 hours, possibly 3, the deep and total sleep of a body that had reached its limit and simply stopped negotiating, when the knock came. Not demanding. Not the knock of someone who had decided they were coming in regardless. A question knock. 2 sounds, even, waiting. She was on her feet with a blade in her hand before she was fully awake. Old habit. She crossed to the door. Who? Me, Draven said, from the other side of the iron. She stood there for a moment with the bolt under her hand. He said lockable from the inside. She turned the bolt and opened the door. He was alone. No Corvin. No wolves at his back. He was carrying 2 bowls of something that smelled like meat broth and had the grace to keep his eyes on her face rather than on the blade she was still holding. How's the burn? He said. Manageable. Can I see it? No. Fine. He held out one of the bowls. Eat something. She looked at the bowl. She looked at him. She took the bowl, and he moved to the chair beside the fire and sat in it with the ease of a man who sat in chairs rather than on thrones, and she sat back on the edge of the bed with the broth warming her hands, and neither of them spoke for a moment. The fire moved in the grate. Outside, the iron walls held their silence. You said they took your brother, he said. Yes. When? 8 months ago. The same night they moved through the southern strongholds. She looked into the bowl. He wasn't Iron Veil. He was nothing to them strategically. He was 23 years old and he could fix a broken cartwheel and tell you the name of every bird in the eastern marshes, and he had never raised a blade in his life. Then why? She was quiet for a moment. The fire. The iron walls. The grey light coming through the narrow window. Because of what he carried, she said, without knowing he carried it. Draven set his bowl down on the arm of the chair and gave her the quality of attention that she had come to recognize as his specific form of listening, complete, still, without the performance of engagement that most people substituted for actual attention. There is a thing, she said carefully, that the Pale Court has been trying to locate for 11 years. Something shifted in his expression. She caught it. You know about 11 years, she said. I told you, he said. We've been dealing with them for 11 years. And you know why they started. It wasn't a question. A long pause settled between them, weighted and particular, the kind that exists when two people discover simultaneously that they have been carrying pieces of the same thing. Tell me what you know, he said. Then I'll tell you what I know. She studied him. Why would you do that? Because you're inside my walls with a resonance burn on your arm and your brother in pale court hands, and whatever you've been carrying alone for 8 months, he said, is clearly not working. It landed the way honest things land. Without softening, without cruelty, simply with the specific weight of a true assessment of a situation. She looked at the fire for a moment. Then she said, 11 years ago, the pale court lost something. Not lost, had it taken from them. By a woman they had been holding for almost a decade. Draven was very still. She was a researcher, Seren continued. Not a warrior. Not an operative. She studied old-world resonance theory, the kind of scholarship that the academies had stopped funding because it had no practical application. A pause. Except it did. It had one very specific practical application that the Pale Court had been developing for years. A way of using resonance to locate, identify, and ultimately collapse the territorial anchors of shifter packs. The fire made a small sound in the grate. A weapon, he said. Not a question. A key, she said. Specifically a key to the anchor points that every major pack uses to bind their territory. If the Pale Court could identify and collapse those anchor points, every pack's territory becomes undefended. Every pack's bond becomes severable, he said. Quiet and absolute. Yes. And the woman who took it. Seren looked at the fire. She encoded it, she said. Whatever she took, whatever the Pale Court had been building, she encoded it and she distributed the pieces. Gave each piece to someone who had no idea what they were carrying. Scattered them across enough lives and enough years that the Pale Court couldn't retrieve it without finding every single person she'd given a piece to. How many people? I don't know the total number. I know that my brother is one of them. She set the bowl down on the floor beside her feet. I know that I spent 8 months tracking the encoding method, trying to understand how to extract the piece he carries without it hurting him, without the Pale Court being able to use it even if they. She stopped. Even if they already have him, Draven said, with a gentleness she hadn't braced for. She didn't answer. Answering meant confirming that the window was closing. That every day the piece stayed inside her brother, in Pale Court hands, was a day they were working on their own extraction method, one that would not be designed with her brother's well-being as a priority. Did you find it? He said. The extraction method. Partially, she said. Enough to know that it requires. She stopped again. Requires what? She looked at him. She had not told anyone this. Not in 8 months. Not the fragments of Iron Veil she had found scattered across the territories. Not the independent scholars she had paid for their time and their silence. Not the people who had sheltered her and asked no questions because asking questions was safer for everyone. She had carried it alone because carrying it alone was the only way to make sure it didn't become a weapon in someone else's hands before she could use it as a key in her own. But she was inside iron walls with a resonance burn on her arm, and her options had a shape to them now, a specific and uncomfortable shape, and the shape had Draven in it whether she had planned for that or not. It requires a resonance anchor, she said. A territorial one. A living one. Strong enough to counteract the encoding without destroying the piece. A pack anchor, he said slowly. The strongest one I could find. The fire. The iron walls. The particular silence of 2 people arriving at the same place from different directions. That's why you ran into my territory, he said. Yes. Not just for cover. Not just to lose the Pale Court trail. No. You came here for the anchor. His voice had a quality she couldn't entirely read. Not anger, not betrayal, something more complex than either. You came here for me. She held his gaze. I came here for your territory's anchor point, she said, which is located in the volcanic ridge beneath your stronghold, which has been documented as the strongest territorial anchor in 400 miles. A pause. I didn't plan on meeting you. No, he said. You planned on getting in, accessing the anchor, completing the extraction, and getting out before anyone knew you'd been here. Yes. Using my pack as cover for the approach. Yes. And then? She was quiet. And then I was going to use the extracted piece to find my brother, she said. And the rest of the distribution network. and give the whole thing to someone who could destroy it before the Pale Court found another way to. Before the Pale Court found another way to finish what they started, he said. Yes. He leaned forward in the chair, elbows on his knees, and looked at her with those winter-gold eyes in the firelight, and she looked back at him, and the iron wound on his shoulder was still there, and her left arm had a cord burn on it, and somewhere out beyond these walls the Pale Court anchor was resetting, and her brother was. Don't think about her brother right now. Don't. Think clearly. Think about the next step. There's something you're not telling me, Draven said. She blinked. There are several things I'm not telling you. Specifically, he said, you said you ran into my territory for the anchor. But the anchor is beneath the stronghold. You can't access it from the perimeter. You can't access it from the marsh. He paused. You have to be inside the walls. She said nothing. And you were running for the eastern border, he said. Away from the stronghold. Not toward it. The fire moved. Which means, he said slowly, that getting inside the walls was never your plan. No, she said. Getting caught was. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped from a height. I needed to be brought inside, she said. I couldn't get in alone. The iron walls, the perimeter wolves, there is no approach that a single operative can execute against a stronghold like this without significant force or getting caught by the Alpha and brought in as a prisoner, he said. Yes. You planned to be caught. I planned to be caught as a suspicious intruder, brought inside for questioning, and to use the access to locate the anchor chamber during whatever containment period your protocols involved. And the Eastern Run. Pressure test, she said. I needed to confirm you'd contain rather than expel. An Alpha who exiles suspicious wolves to the border is no use to me. An Alpha who brings them inside and asks questions is exactly the access point you needed, he said. She held his gaze. Yes. He sat back. He looked at her for a long moment, and she endured the looking with her spine straight and her hands visible and her face in the expression that she used for situations where she had told the truth and the truth was not comfortable and there was nothing to do now but let it be what it was. You were never the hunter, he said. No, you were the bait. I was the mechanism, she said. The Pale Court following me was always the risk. Getting inside the walls before they caught up was always the plan. And if I had expelled you, then I would have found another way. And if I had handed you to them, a beat, I'd have found a way out of that too, she said, with a certainty she mostly felt. He looked at her. Then, with that specific quality of unexpectedness that she was beginning to associate specifically with him, he laughed. Not loudly, not long. A short, low sound, involuntary and genuine, that crossed his face and was gone almost before she could register it. But she registered it. 3 days, he said, something almost like wonder in his voice. You ran inside my pack for 3 days, let me catch you on the shelf, walk through my gate, and the whole time I was exactly where I planned to be, she said. Except for the Pale Court arriving early. They were ahead of schedule, she admitted. That was an adjustment. An adjustment. A significant adjustment. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him reorganizing everything. Every observation from 3 days of watching her run, every exchange on the shelf and on the granite and in the formation, every piece of the picture rearranging itself into a new configuration that was true rather than the configuration he had been working from. The anchor chamber, he said finally. She waited. Is accessible, he said, from the lower level of the stronghold. I'll take you there. She stared at him. Tomorrow, he said, when the cord burn has had a full day. When you've had a real night of sleep and something more substantial than broth. He stood from the chair. And when the Pale Court has regrouped and moved on the walls, and I need to be certain of what you're doing with my anchor before I let you do it. You're going to let me use the anchor. I'm going to listen to the rest of it, he said. Tonight you told me what you need and why. Tomorrow you tell me what the extraction actually involves. What it costs. He looked at her steadily. Everything you've been running alone with for 8 months. She looked at the fire. It might cost more than you want to pay, she said. Let me decide that. It's not just your decision. Seren. Her name. Again. That careful placement. She looked at him. You walked into my territory to find an anchor strong enough to save your brother, he said. You ran 3 days and got yourself caught and faced down Pale Court hunters on a frost-slit shelf and resisted the decree. A pause. All of that, alone. She held very still. You don't have to do the rest of it alone, he said. The fire moved in the grate. The iron walls held their silence. Outside, somewhere beyond the dark stone and the frozen ground and the birch trees, the pale court was reassembling, counting its pieces, planning the next approach. And in a room in the south tower of the Ashveil stronghold, she looked at the Storm King standing in her firelight and felt something shift inside her chest. Not dramatically, not like a door thrown open, but the way ice shifts at the very first suggestion of spring. Slow, reluctant, absolutely inevitable. You don't know what you're offering, she said. Not fully, he agreed. Tell me tomorrow. He moved to the door. Lock it from the inside, he said. And he was gone. She sat in the firelit room for a long time after that. The bolt stayed where it was. Unlocked. Chapter 7. She woke to the sound of the iron walls singing. Not singing the way something beautiful sings. Singing the way a struck blade sings. That high, sustained resonance of metal under stress, carrying through stone and floor and the marrow of the bed frame and the specific density of the air in the room, arriving in her chest before it arrived in her ears. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious. Blade in hand. Back to the wall. Eyes on the door. The door was closed. The bolt was where she had left it. Unlocked. Slightly open the way a question is slightly open when the person asking it already suspects the answer. The singing was not the door. The singing was the walls. She dressed in the dark, quickly, with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent enough mornings like this to stop resenting them. The cord burn on her left arm was better. The bog balm had done its work overnight and the stiffness in her fingers was mostly gone, replaced by a dull, negotiable ache that she filed under manageable and moved on from. She crossed to the narrow window. The courtyard below was already active. Wolves in both forms moving with the coordinated urgency of a pack that had been woken by the same resonance she had felt, that had the same training, that had been here before. Torches moved in patterns that she recognized after a moment as perimeter reinforcement. The gate was sealed. She could see Corvin at the far end of the courtyard, human form, directing the movement with short gestures and the particular economy of someone who had run this preparation many times. Beyond the walls, nothing visible. Just the dark, and the frost, and the birch trees standing white and skeletal in the pre-dawn. And the sound of the walls. Growing. The knock came 3 minutes later. Not a question knock this time. 2 sharp sounds, evenly spaced, with an efficiency that told her everything she needed to know about the state of the situation before she opened the door. Draven stood in the corridor. He was dressed for combat, close-fitted dark leather, no cloak, the kind of configuration that prioritized movement over warmth. The iron wound on his shoulder was almost closed. She could see that from here, the tissue having done overnight what the iron had been slowing for most of yesterday. His eyes had the pre-dawn quality she was beginning to recognize as his specific form of readiness. Not agitation, not fear, but a sharpening, a compression. The blade before motion quality. They moved faster than 2 hours, she said. They didn't regroup, he said. They were already regrouped. They were waiting for dark. How many? Corvin counted 17 at the north face. She absorbed that. That's not a retrieval party. No, he said. It's not. 17 pale court hunters at the wall was not a formation built for retrieval. Retrieval was 5, careful, surgical. 17 was a statement. 17 was the pale court communicating, in the specific language of force, that whatever she had done or taken or represented had elevated from a priority to an absolute. They know I'm inside, she said. They've known since before we got back. The anchor tracked you to the walls and then lost you, the way you said it would. He looked at her steadily. But losing the track didn't make them leave. It made them patient. Until it didn't. Until it didn't, he agreed. The walls sang around them, that sustained, pressure-shifting resonance of iron under pale court attention, of 17 sets of that wrong frequency power pressing against a barrier that was, so far, holding. So far. How long do the walls hold against a formation this size? She said. We've never had a formation this size. She looked at him. But the walls hold, he said. That's not speculation. That's 11 years of evidence. Iron is the one material the pale court cannot move through, cannot corrupt, cannot. He stopped. She heard it too. A sound from the north face, not the sustained singing of the walls under pressure, but something different. A crack. Small. High. The specific sound of something finding a weak point and beginning, very patiently, to work it. Can they breach? She said. A silence that was itself an answer. Draven. Not quickly, he said. Not without cost. But 17, with time. He looked at the ceiling, at the walls, at the specific quality of the resonance humming through the stone. Yes. With enough time, yes. She was already moving toward the door. Where? He said. You said the anchor chamber is in the lower level. It is. Then we need to be there. Now. Before they find the weak point or before. Seren. His voice stopped her at the threshold. She turned. He was looking at her with that winter-gold gaze and the pre-dawn sharpness, and something beneath both of those things that was neither calculation nor anger but something she kept failing to name. You said last night that it might cost more than I want to pay. Yes. Tell me now, before we go down there. She stood in the doorway with the walls singing around them and 17 pale court hunters pressing against the iron from the outside and her brother somewhere beyond all of it in the dark. The extraction requires the anchor to make contact with the encoded piece, she said. Direct resonance contact. The anchor recognizes the encoding. It was built from the same theoretical framework, 11 years ago, by the same woman. The anchor and the encoding are the same language. All right. But the anchor doesn't just extract the piece. It absorbs it, takes it in and neutralizes it, folds it into the territorial resonance where the pale court can't isolate or retrieve it. All right, he said again, slower. The anchor is living, she said. It's not a structure, not a physical object. It's a living resonance that exists in the rock and in the pack bond and in the... She stopped. In the alpha. A beat. It's in me, he said. The territorial anchor of an Ashveil Pack lives in the alpha's bond, she said. You are the anchor. You are the strongest point of it. The rock in the lower chamber is where it's most concentrated and most accessible, but the living center of it is you. He was very still. Which means, he said, that to extract the piece from your brother, you don't just need access to the chamber. No, you need access to me. Direct resonance contact, she said. Between the encoded piece and the living anchor. Which means between whatever your brother is carrying and, she looked at him. And you. The walls sang. The crack in the north face made its small, patient sound again. And the cost, he said. You said it might cost more than I want to pay. She had spent 8 months with this knowledge. 8 months carrying it with the specific weight of information that asks something enormous of someone who has no reason to give it. The absorption changes the anchor, she said. Permanently. It incorporates the encoded piece into the territorial resonance, which means it incorporates whatever the original researcher built into the pale quartz weapon, all of it, every frequency, every layer, into the pack bond. What does that mean in practice? It means your territory changes, she said. Not dramatically, not visibly, but the resonance of this land, this pack, this bond, it will carry something extra in it, something older, something that came from a place and a purpose that wasn't yours. And the danger. She held his gaze. The pale court spent 11 years building that weapon. Parts of it are in multiple people. But the anchor piece, the piece that holds the key to collapsing pack bonds, is the most volatile component. Absorbing it into a living territorial anchor could. She stopped, chose precision over softening. It could amplify the anchor's power significantly. More territory, stronger bond, deeper connection between the alpha and the pack. That sounds like a benefit. It could also destabilize it, she said. If the absorption doesn't hold cleanly. If the anchor rejects the encoding rather than incorporating it. The backlash could damage the bond. Could damage the pack. Could damage me. Yes. The word sat between them. How likely, he said. I don't know, she said, and hated saying it, hated the specific helplessness of the honest answer. I've spent 8 months on the theory. I believe the incorporation is more likely than the rejection. The Ashveil anchor is the strongest in 400 miles. It's more likely to have the resilience to. She stopped. But I don't know. I can't promise you it doesn't hurt your pack. Draven looked at her for a long moment. The walls sang. The crack spoke its small, patient word. And your brother, he said. If we don't do this. She looked at the floor. At the dark stone, frost-cold even through her boots. If the pale court extracts the piece from him using their method, she said, it will kill him. The encoding is wound into his resonance. Their extraction method doesn't account for the carrier. It just removes it. A silence fell that had the specific weight of a choice being weighed by someone who takes the weight of choices seriously. Come on, Draven said. She looked up. He was already moving down the corridor, toward the stairs that led to the lower level, carrying the risk she had just laid out with the specific quality of a man who had heard it, measured it, and decided that it was his to carry. You understand what I just told you, she said, following. Yes. You understand that I can't guarantee. You told me you don't know, he said, taking the stairs with an unhurried certainty. I heard you. I'm going anyway. Just like that. Not just like that, he said. I've been dealing with the Pale Court for 11 years. I've lost wolves to them. I've lost territory to them. I've spent 11 years building iron walls and running perimeter checks and preparing for a formation size I've never seen before tonight. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, turning to look at her from the lower corridor's dark. You're telling me there's a way to neutralize the piece of their weapon that matters most. The piece that makes everything else possible. Potentially neutralize, she said. Potentially, he agreed. I'll take potentially. She looked at him in the torchlit dark of the lower corridor, at the wintergold eyes and the iron-wound shoulder and the quality of absolute steadiness that seemed to be structural in him, not performed, not constructed for effect, just the load-bearing material he was made of. Why? She said. And she meant it as a tactical question, meant it as an operational inquiry into his decision-making, meant it to come out clean and analytical. It did not come out clean and analytical. He seemed to hear what she actually meant, which was worse. Because you've been carrying it alone for 8 months, he said. And you shouldn't have had to. The walls sang above them. She didn't answer, because answering required resources she was not currently sure she had. She followed him down the corridor instead. The anchor chamber was not what she had imagined from the documents. The documents described a resonance point, a location of concentrated territorial energy, identifiable by geological markers, accessible via the stronghold's lower level. Clinical. Positional. The language of scholars who had studied the theory without ever standing inside the fact of it. The chamber was a cave. A natural cavity in the volcanic rock, roughly circular, perhaps 30 feet across, with a ceiling that arched overhead in the specific organic geometry of something that had been shaped by heat and pressure over a very long time. The walls were dark basalt, shot through with threads of something that was not quite mineral and not quite light, a faint, deep luminescence that pulsed in a rhythm she recognized after a moment as a heartbeat. Not hers. His. The anchor's pulse was his pulse. She could feel it against the soles of her feet through the rock floor, against her palms when she pressed them to the nearest wall, warm, deliberate, alive. The same rhythm as the man standing 3 feet behind her. You've been here before, she said. Since I was a child, he said. My father brought me here when I was old enough to feel it, when the bond started. What does it feel like? She said, from the inside. A pause. Like standing in the middle of everything that matters, he said. Like the ground knowing your name. She kept her hands on the wall and felt the pulse of it. His pulse, the land's pulse, the pack's pulse, all the same rhythm, all the same living thing, and understood for the first time not just theoretically but actually, in the soles of her feet and the palms of her hands, what she was asking him to risk. She turned around. He was watching her with an expression she had been failing to name since the shelf, since the broth and the firelight, since the bolt left unlocked. She named it now. Not calculation. Not anger. Not the architectural patience of a man who had decided to wait something out. Certainty. He looked at her with the certainty of someone who had already made the only decision that mattered and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. She did not examine what that meant. Not now. Not with the walls singing overhead and the pale court pressing their patient work on the crack in the north face. Tell me what you need me to do, he said. She looked at the chamber, at the pulsing walls, the warm rock, the living heartbeat of the strongest territorial anchor in 400 miles. I need to contact my brother, she said. The piece he carries, to extract it, the anchor needs to reach him. Reach the resonance of wherever he is. And I need to be the bridge. How? The anchor responds to blood contact in the holder, she said. Your blood on the stone activates the reach. Extends it beyond the territory's physical boundary, following the pack bond's frequency. She paused. And my blood acts as the directional element. I've been in proximity to my brother's resonance my whole life. My frequency is, it's mapped to his. The anchor uses your strength and my direction. He was quiet for a moment. And the incorporation happens at the moment of contact. If the anchor accepts the piece, If it incorporates rather than rejects, we'll know immediately. How will we know? She met his eyes. You'll feel it, she said. The way you feel the bond. The way you feel the pack. Something new entering it. And if it rejects? She held his gaze. You'll feel that too, she said. And I need you to tell me the moment you feel anything that isn't incorporation. The moment it feels like damage rather than addition. Do you understand? Yes. If it starts to reject, I stop the process. I pull back. The piece stays in my brother and we find another. Another way, he said. I understand. Draven. She said his name with a deliberateness that surprised her slightly. I need you to actually tell me. Not manage through it. Not decide it's a cost worth bearing and stay quiet. The moment you feel damage. I'll tell you, he said. She studied his face. You're very certain of that. I'm certain of most things I decide to be certain of, he said. It's a character flaw. She almost made that sound again, the one she'd caught in time on the shelf. This time she caught it less cleanly, and the almost sound that escaped her was quiet and involuntary, and his expression did something briefly in response to it that she filed immediately under Do Not Examine. She turned back to the wall. I need a blade, she said. Mine are iron core. The anchor needs clean contact. He crossed to the far wall. She heard the sound of stone moving, a fitted block, a hollow behind it, the specific sound of something carefully stored. He returned and held out a small knife, the kind of thing a person carries not as a weapon but as a tool, plain-handled, short-bladed, made of something dark and warm-looking that was neither iron nor steel. Volcanic glass, she said, recognizing it. Sharper than iron, he said. And the anchor knows it. She took it. She looked at the pulsing wall for a moment. Together, she said. On my count. Together, he said. She pressed her left palm to the warm stone. He pressed his right palm beside it, their hands on the wall. The anchor's pulse rising in response. She felt it change, felt the rhythm quicken slightly, felt the warmth in the rock move toward their contact points like water finding the lowest ground. Now, she said. The volcanic glass was cold and then not cold, and then the wall between her palm and the rock dissolved into something that wasn't a wall at all. Something vast opened beneath them. Not physically. Not in any way that eyes could track. But in the specific space where the anchor lived, that living resonance, that heartbeat in stone, something reached outward. Wide and deep and warm and unimaginably strong. Following her direction like a compass finding north. Following the mapped frequency of blood and proximity and a childhood spent in the same rooms, breathing the same air, learning the names of birds from the same voice. She felt her brother. Not saw. Not heard. Felt. The resonance of him, specific and unmistakable and alive. Alive. He was alive. The pale court hadn't. He was alive. Somewhere far to the north, enclosed in something cold and contained. But there. Present. Breathing. His alive, she thought. And the thought had a quality to it that bypassed strategy and training and 8 months of careful operational distance and arrived somewhere much more fundamental. His alive. The anchor pressed forward. She felt Draven's pulse against her palm through the stone. Faster now, not afraid, not damaged, but working, the way a body works when it is doing something that requires everything. The encoded piece was there. She could feel it, wound into her brother's resonance the way a thread is wound into fabric, inseparable from the weave, identical in frequency to the thing it had been encoded from. The anchor reached it, recognized it, and she felt. She felt the moment of decision. The anchor considering the piece. The living territorial resonance of the Ashveil Pack turning the encoding over the way a mind turns over a complex thought. Examining it, tasting it, understanding what it would mean to take this in. Accept it, she thought, or perhaps said aloud, she wasn't certain. Accept it. Please. The walls sang. Overhead, distantly, the crack in the north face made a sound that was no longer small. And the anchor breathed in. She felt it happen. The incorporation was not violent. That was the thing she had spent 8 months fearing. That it would be violent, that it would tear rather than fold, that the pale quartz weapon encoding would resist the anchor's living warmth and produce the backlash she had warned him about, and she would watch the pack bond fracture in real time with her hand pressed against the stone that carried it. It was not violent. It was slow and warm, and had the quality of something being recognized rather than absorbed. The anchor taking the piece the way the earth takes rain, not reluctantly, not with effort, but with the specific ease of something returning to where it came from. The researcher who had encoded it, 11 years ago. The researcher who had distributed the pieces to protect them had built the encoding from the same theoretical framework as the territorial anchor. Had built it, Seren understood in that moment, from the territorial anchor. She had been here, in this chamber, with her hands on this stone. She had hidden the most dangerous piece of the weapon she was trying to keep from the pale court inside the one place she trusted to keep it, the living anchor of the strongest pack she knew. She had just been waiting for someone to bring it home. Seren pulled her hand from the wall. Draven stood beside her, palm still pressed to the stone, eyes closed. His breathing was elevated but controlled. The pulse in the rock had changed. Still his rhythm, still the pack's rhythm, but with something added to it. Something layered beneath the familiar beat like a harmony beneath a melody. Older, deeper, not wrong, just more. Draven. He opened his eyes. She looked at him carefully, reading everything she could in his face, his posture, the quality of his stillness. Is it? She began. It held, he said. You're certain? I can feel it, he said. In the bond. In the territory. He turned his head to look at her, and his eyes had the anchor's warmth in them, that deep luminescence from the walls reflected back. It's not damage. It's like the land got bigger. She exhaled. The exhale came from somewhere she hadn't been able to reach for 8 months, from a depth she'd sealed off and locked and told herself she would open when the work was done. She had not planned to open it here. She had not planned for it to feel like this, standing in a cave beneath a volcanic ridge with her palm bleeding gently from the glass cut and her brother alive somewhere to the north and the walls singing overhead with 17 pale court hunters pressing on the iron and the Storm King 3 feet away looking at her like she was something the anchor had always known about. Hey, Draven said. She looked at him. I've got you, he said. Quietly. Simply. The walls sang. She looked at him for one long, unguarded moment. The kind of moment that happens when everything that has been held at operational distance for 8 months simply stops holding. And then she put it away, put it neatly and firmly away, and said, We need to deal with the north face. Yes, he said. And then I need to tell you where my brother is. Yes. And then we need to figure out how to get him back. Yes, he said, for the 3rd time, with a quality that made the word feel less like agreement and more like a promise. He moved toward the chamber door. He stopped. Seren. She looked at him. The bolt, he said. Last night. You left it unlocked. She held his gaze. I know, she said. A beat. Good, he said. And they went up to face the walls together. Chapter 8. They heard the north face give before they reached the top of the stairs. It was not a dramatic sound. That was the thing about iron under sustained pale court pressure. It didn't fail loudly. It didn't shatter or explode or come down in the cinematic collapse of something overwhelmed by force. It failed quietly. A long, low groan that moved through the stone of the stronghold like a thought moving through a sleeping mind, present, purposeful, and wrong in a way that the body registered before the brain caught up. Then the screaming started. Not wolves. The pale court didn't scream. The sound was the iron itself, the specific resonance of a material that had been holding something at bay for 11 years finally finding the limit of what it could hold. A high, sustained note, climbing in frequency as the breach widened, that pressed against the inner ear and made thought briefly difficult. She took the last 4 stays in 2 strides. The courtyard had changed. 30 seconds. That was all it had taken between the sound from the lower level and arriving at the top of the stairs, and in 30 seconds the organized, torchlit preparation of an hour ago had become something else entirely. The wolves on the north perimeter were holding. She could see that. She assessed it immediately. The line had not broken, but holding at cost, pressing back against a gap in the iron wall that was approximately 4 feet wide and growing, the pale court hunters coming through it in the wrong tall, wrong fast way that made the eye want to slide off them. 7 through so far. 10 more at the breach. 17, she thought. All of them. This was not a retrieval. This had never been a retrieval. Retrieval parties didn't breach iron walls. Retrieval parties didn't commit a full formation to a defended stronghold with 32 wolves inside it. Whatever the pale court had decided she represented, whatever the extraction of that piece from her brother's resonance meant to them, they had moved past wanting her back. They wanted to make sure nobody had what she'd come here to get. Too late, she thought, with a satisfaction she did not have time to examine. Draven was already in the courtyard. She didn't see him shift. It happened in the space between one step and the next, that violent, total transformation she had watched once before from across 30 yards of dark water. And then a massive charcoal and silver wolf was crossing the courtyard at a speed that made the torchlight stutter, and the sound he produced as he hit the first pale court hunter through the breach was not a growl. It was something older than a growl, something that came from the anchor. She felt it in the soles of her feet through the stone, the same pulse she had felt in the chamber below, but amplified, changed, carrying that new harmonic layer that the incorporation had added. Deeper, wider, a resonance that pressed outward from him like a shockwave and hit the pale court hunters with a force that had nothing to do with physical impact. 3 of the 7 inside the walls staggered. She had never seen a pale court hunter stagger from a sound before. The incorporation, she thought, pulling her blades and moving toward the breach. It changed the anchor. It changed him. The pack bond is carrying the encoded frequency now, and the pale court. The pale court is feeling their own weapon turned back on them. She went for the breach. Not because she was reckless. She had used up her allocation of recklessness for the decade on the granite shelf, but because the breach was the tactical problem. Wolves could hold a contained courtyard fight. Wolves could not hold a fight where the perimeter was open and reinforcements could keep coming through. Close the breach. Change the shape of the problem. She reached the gap in the iron wall and assessed it in the half-second she had. 4 feet wide, the edges of the iron curled inward in the specific way that pale court pressure work produced. The metal not cut or broken but persuaded to move aside, which was somehow more unsettling. 3 hunters still at the outside of the breach, preparing to push through. She went low and hit the left-hand hunter at the knees with her shoulder, driving it back into the 2 behind it, using the momentum of 3 bodies now off balance rather than trying to stop any of them individually. The iron core blades did their work. She had both of them moving within 4 seconds of contact and was back inside the breach before the 3rd hunter recovered its footing, and she was dimly aware as she moved that fighting felt different tonight. Not easier. Nothing about fighting pale court hunters was or would ever be easy, but different. As if the resonance from the chamber below was still in her palms, still humming in the bones of her hands, and the iron core blades were picking it up and carrying it. The hunter she had driven back came through the breach a second time. She met it with the right-hand blade and the flat-handed chest strike, and it went down, and the one behind it hesitated. Pale court hunters did not hesitate. She had never seen one hesitate. It looked at her, that covered face, that wrong-tall stillness, and it hesitated, and in the space of that hesitation something cold moved through her chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. It recognizes something, she thought. Not me. Something about me. Something that changed in the chamber. She didn't have time to follow the thought. She hit it before it stopped hesitating, and the problem resolved itself in the immediate physical way that problems resolve when you stop thinking about them and start moving. The breach held at 4 feet for 7 minutes. She knew because she counted, the operational part of her mind keeping its tally even while the rest of it was occupied with the specific and demanding work of being one person in an iron gap with pale court hunters on one side and a pack of wolves on the other, and no room for anything except the next correct movement. 4 feet for 7 minutes. And then it stopped growing. She felt it before she understood why. A change in the pressure on her side of the gap, the specific shift of a force being withdrawn rather than held back. She straightened from the combat crouch and looked through the breach at the outside. The hunters who had been working the wall were gone. She turned. The courtyard, the 7 hunters who had made it through, plus the ongoing pack, was resolving. Not cleanly, not without cost, but resolving. Wolves were down but moving. The pale court hunters were down and not moving, which was the relevant distinction. And in the center of the courtyard, in wolf form, the Storm King stood. The silver threads in his coat were doing something they had not been doing before the chamber. A faint luminescence, the same deep warmth she had seen in the walls below, moved through the charcoal and silver fur like light through dark water. His eyes were not the pale gold she had catalogued and studied and memorized over 3 days of careful observation. They were white, not blank, not absent. White the way the anchor chamber walls had been luminescent, a deep, warm, living white that was more light than color. The remaining pale court presence, the hunters outside the walls, the formation she had counted at 17, was withdrawing. She watched them go. She watched the wrong tall shapes move back through the birch trees in the wrong fast way, and she tracked the withdrawal with the part of her mind that assessed tactical decisions, and the assessment produced one conclusion with absolute clarity. They were not retreating because they had failed. They were retreating because they had seen something. Something in the courtyard that had changed their calculation. Something that was, She was increasingly certain, standing in the center of the courtyard with white eyes and the anchor's light in its fur. Draven shifted back at the edge of the courtyard. The change moved through him the way it always did, fast and total and indifferent. And then he was standing in human form with his shoulders rising and falling from the exertion and Corvin pressing a cloak into his hands with the practiced ease of long habit. His eyes, when he opened them, were gold again. Pale gold. Winter gold. But there was something in them now, a depth that hadn't been there yesterday, a quality of the chamber's warmth still present, the way a room holds the memory of a fire that's been banked but not extinguished. He looked across the courtyard. He found her immediately, standing at the breach with both blades still drawn and the cold morning air coming through the gap in the iron wall behind her. He crossed toward her. She tracked his approach and did not put the blades away because the blades were currently the only thing she was entirely certain about and she needed at least one certainty. He stopped 6 feet away. The standard distance. Their distance, she thought, and then told herself firmly that it was not their distance. It was simply a distance that had occurred repeatedly and had no significance. The breach, she said, because starting with something operational was safer than starting with any of the other available starting points. Corvin will have it sealed before dawn, he said. We have materials. The withdrawal. I saw it. They weren't beaten, she said. They chose to leave. I know. Something changed their assessment. Something they saw that. Seren. She stopped. He was looking at her with that winter gold depth and the anchor's warmth behind it, and his expression had the quality of a man who has just learned something significant and is deciding how to say it. When I shifted, he said, and the anchor came up through the bond, the way it always does when I shift into full alpha power, it felt different. The incorporation, she said. I told you it would change. Not just different in the way you described, he said. Different in a specific way that I think you need to know about. She held his gaze. The anchor reaches the whole territory when I access the full bond, he said. Every resonance inside these walls. Every pack member. Every living frequency within the boundary. Yes, that's the nature of a territorial anchor. It reached you, he said. She was very still. That's not unusual, she said. You said yourself that anyone inside the walls. It didn't just reach you the way it reaches territory, he said. It reached you the way it reaches pack. The courtyard was quiet around them. Wolves moving in the peripheral dark, tending to the wounded, beginning the work of the breach. Torchlight and cold air and the last of the pale quartz resonance dissolving from the iron walls like frost in morning sun. She didn't answer. And when it reached you the way it reaches pack, he said, it found something. Draven. It found the same frequency as the piece in your brother, he said. Not identical. Not encoded the same way. But the same origin. The same theoretical framework. The same. He stopped. He looked at her with an expression that was doing something she had not seen it do before. Not the architectural patience. Not the pre-dawn sharpening. Not the compression of controlled anger. Something more careful than any of those. Something that moved around what it was looking at the way a hand moves around something that might be fragile. You're not the carrier's sister, he said. Her jaw tightened. Of course I am. You're not only the carrier's sister, he said. The anchor doesn't lie. It can't. It reads living resonance the way the land reads seasons, without judgment, without preference, just accurately. He paused. You're carrying a piece too. The cold air came through the breach and moved across the courtyard, and she stood in it and felt the specific weight of being known by something she hadn't consented to be known by. It's not a piece of the weapon, she said carefully. It's not encoded. It's not. What is it? He said. She looked past him. At the dark basalt walls, shot through in the pre-dawn light with that faint deep luminescence that had not been there yesterday. At the stronghold she had planned to use and leave. At the gate that had been open when she arrived and was sealed now, sealed with iron and wolves and the specific weight of a situation that had stopped being what she'd planned it to be somewhere between the shelf and the chamber and the unlocked bolt. The researcher, she said. The woman who distributed the pieces. Who built the encoding from the anchor's theoretical framework. She felt him go very still. She didn't just encode the weapon, she said. She encoded a key. A specific frequency that would allow the person carrying it to navigate the pieces, to find them, to understand the encoding, to perform the extraction without destroying the carrier. A map, he said. A compass, she said. Something that always knows which direction the pieces are. Something that can communicate with the anchor when the conditions are right. You didn't know about the anchor piece in your brother, he said slowly. You knew exactly where it was. You've always known. Yes. Because the compass told you. Yes. Which means you've always known where every piece is. She was quiet. How many? He said. 7, she said. Including my brother. Including me. 7 people carrying pieces of a pale court weapon. 7 people carrying pieces of the only thing that can permanently neutralize a pale court weapon, she said. Depending on which way you look at it. A long silence fell between them. Above, the pre-dawn sky was beginning its slow negotiation with light, that first gray softening at the eastern edge that was not yet dawn but was the promise of it. The birch trees caught it first, their white bark luminous in the almost dark. The pale court knew, he said. About the compass. That's why they escalated to a breach formation. They weren't just trying to retrieve the anchor piece. They were trying to get me back before I used the compass to find the others, she said. Before I finished what the researcher started. How long have you been carrying it? She looked at him. Since I was born, she said. The researcher encoded it into a bloodline. Passed it down through a family she trusted. A pause. My mother's family. Your mother. Died 8 years before the pale court moved on the Iron Veil, she said. She never told me what I was carrying. She may not have known herself. The compass doesn't announce itself. It just orients. It just always knows which way to go. She thought of 8 months of running. Of every decision that had felt like instinct. This road rather than that one. This border rather than that one. This pack rather than any of the others in 400 miles. Not instinct, she thought. Direction. You always knew you were coming here, Draven said. I thought it was tactical reasoning, she said. The strongest anchor in 400 miles. The most defensible approach. The pack most likely to contain rather than expel. She paused. Apparently it was simpler than that. The compass brought you home, he said. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't make it mean something it doesn't mean. He looked at her steadily. I'm not making it mean anything. I'm saying what the anchor showed me. The anchor is a territorial resonance, she said. It responds to frequency. It doesn't have opinions about. Seren. It doesn't have opinions about. The anchor, he said, quietly and precisely, has been the foundation of this pack's bond for 4 generations. It knows the difference between someone who belongs in this territory and someone who is passing through. She looked at him. It's never reached a visitor like Pack before, he said. In 4 generations and every person who has ever stood inside these walls. Not once. The torchlight moved across the courtyard. Somewhere behind her, through the breach, the birch trees were beginning to separate themselves from the dark. She felt the compass in her chest, that quiet, constant orientation that she had spent her whole life calling instinct, calling tactical reasoning, calling anything except what it was, and it was pointing, with its usual calm and absolute certainty, directly at the man standing 6 feet in front of her. What do you want me to do with that information? She said. Nothing, he said. Right now I want you to help me understand what finding the other 6 pieces actually requires. She blinked. You want to? 6 more people carrying fragments of a pale court weapon that can neutralize pack bonds across 4 territories, he said. 6 more people the pale court is going to move on with breach formations the moment they regroup from tonight. He looked at her with the wintergold depth and the anchor's warmth and that quality of certainty that she was beginning to understand was not stubbornness but something more fundamental. I want to know what finding them requires and how long we have and what it costs. She said. He said. She looked at the sealed gate. She looked at the iron walls, shot through with that new luminescence, holding the dark at bay with 4 generations of deliberate, careful, living intention. She looked at the man who had taken a volcanic glass blade to his palm in a chamber beneath a mountain and held his hand against ancient stone and felt his territory change and called it something the land got bigger. It requires the compass, she said, which means it requires me. And it requires an anchor strong enough to perform the incorporation at each location. She paused, which means it requires you. He absorbed that. All 6, he said. All 6. In sequence. Before the pale court can move on the remaining carriers. And your brother. My brother is the 3rd piece, she said. Once the anchor reaches him through the incorporation we did tonight, now that the connection is established, I can find him. Physically. I know the direction. She touched her chest, briefly, involuntarily. I've always known the direction. Then we go north, he said. She stared at him. The pale court regrouped faster than you expected last time, he said. I'm not waiting for them to do it again with a larger formation. He turned toward the main hall. Corvin will have the breach sealed by dawn. We leave at first light. You can't leave your territory, she said. The pack. The pack has a beta who has been running this stronghold's defense for 11 years, he said, and an anchor that is now significantly more robust than it was yesterday. He looked back at her over his shoulder. The pack will be fine. You don't know that. I know Corvin, he said. That's close enough. She looked at the sealed gate. At the breach, Corvin's wolves were already beginning to close with practiced efficiency. At the courtyard full of the pack that had held a 17-hunter breach formation for 20 minutes and was now calmly, methodically, cleaning up after it. You're not what the field reports described, she said. He stopped. No, he said. What did they describe? Territorial, she said. Isolationist. Hostile to outside contact. Unlikely to cooperate with non-pack operatives under any circumstances. All accurate, he said. This is not those things. No, he said. It's not. He looked at her steadily. Ask me why. She held his gaze. She did not ask him why. She was not ready to ask him why. She looked away first, which was a thing she had not done in 3 days of careful observation and 1 night of firelight and 1 morning of volcanic glass and an anchor that had reached her like pack, and said, to the iron wall, to the pre-dawn light beginning to find the courtyard. I'll be ready at first light. I know, he said, and he went inside. She stood in the courtyard for a long time after that, with the compass in her chest pointing steadily north and the anchor's warmth in her palms where she had pressed them to the stone and the pre-dawn light arriving slowly over the birch trees, and thought. The field reports were wrong about the weight. They were wrong about a lot of things. She was beginning to think she had been too. Chapter 9. They left at first light. Not the soft, gradual first light of a morning that has decided to be gentle. The dawn that came up over the Ashveil Ridge was the kind that arrived like a verdict, hard-edged and iron-grey, burning the last of the night off the birch trees in long, flat sheets of cold illumination that left nowhere to hide and nothing to soften. She was in the courtyard before Draven. She had been awake since before the pre-dawn, had not, if she was being precise about it, returned to sleep after the courtyard. She had sat in the south tower room with the fire banked low and the bolt unlocked and the compass in her chest pointing north with its usual patient certainty, and she had done what she always did when a situation had moved past the edges of her operational planning. She had made a new plan. The new plan had Draven in it. She was still deciding how she felt about that. He came through the main hall door at the exact moment the sun cleared the ridge. She noted the timing without commenting on it. The specific quality of a man who had been awake long enough to know exactly when first light would arrive and had timed his exit accordingly. He was carrying 2 packs, both dark leather, both clearly prepared in advance. He set one beside her without preamble. She looked at it, then at him. I had supplies prepared, he said. Before we went to the chamber. Before we went to the chamber, she repeated. Before you knew we were going anywhere. Before I knew for certain, he said. I had a strong suspicion. She looked at the pack again. It was the right weight. She could tell from the way it sat on the stone, the specific density of something packed by someone who understood the difference between what you want to carry and what you can afford to carry over distance. Food, water, tools, nothing decorative. How long have you been doing this? She said. Packing supplies. Preparing for situations before they are confirmed. He picked up his own pack and settled it across his shoulders with the ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Since I was 15, he said. My father told me that an alpha who waits for certainty before preparing is an alpha who spends his life catching up to events. She picked up the pack. It fit like it had been made for her measurements. She chose not to examine that. Corvin was waiting at the gate. He looked at Draven with the expression of a beta who had opinions and had decided, after some internal debate, to voice them. The breach is sealed, he said. The north face is reinforced. The pack is functional. A pause that carried weight. My king. I know, Draven said. 17 hunters last night, Corvin said. If they regroup with a larger. The anchor is stronger than it was yesterday, Draven said. You'll feel it in the bond. Use it. Corvin looked at her. It was not a hostile look. It was the look of a man performing a very thorough assessment of a variable he had not been given enough time to fully evaluate, and arriving at conclusions he was keeping to himself for now. The Iron Veil's field operatives had a 73% mission completion rate, he said. She looked at him steadily. 78, she said. The field reports undercounted the northern operations. Something shifted in Corvin's expression. Not warmth exactly, but the specific adjustment of someone who has been given a number they respect. Come back, he said to Draven. Plan to, Draven said. Corvin looked at her one more time. Both of you, he said, and stepped back from the gate. The birch trees swallowed them within 100 yards of the walls. She had run through these trees twice now, once in wolf form in the dark, once at speed with a pack around her and pale court hunters at her back. Walking through them in the grey morning light with a pack on her shoulders and a man 4 feet to her left was a sufficiently different experience that she kept catching herself noticing it. The trees were beautiful, actually. She had not had time to notice that before. Stop noticing things, she told herself. Operational focus. North. Your brother. The 6 pieces. The pale court regrouping somewhere beyond the birch trees. 6 feet, the other part of her said, with the infuriating persistence of a part that had stopped cooperating some time around the unlocked bolt. His 4 feet away, actually. Closer than 6. You've been maintaining 6 feet since the shelf. You moved. She had moved. She moved back to 6 feet without looking at him, and felt rather than saw the quality of his awareness register it, and said nothing, and focused on the road. The road north from the Ashveil territory was not a road in any maintained sense. It was a track, frost-hardened clay following the path of least resistance through the terrain, navigable by someone who knew it and interpretable by someone who didn't but could read the land. She could read the land. So could he. They moved in a silence that was not uncomfortable, which was itself a kind of discomfort, because uncomfortable silence was something she knew how to manage, had managed for 8 months across a dozen territories, and silence that was not uncomfortable was something that required a different set of tools she was less certain she possessed. The compass pointed north. She followed it the way she always had, through the body rather than the mind, a felt direction rather than a calculated one, the way water follows gravity without consulting a map. Draven walked beside her and did not ask which way, did not consult her for direction, did not produce his own assessment of the route. He simply walked where she walked. After a mile she said, without fully planning to say it, "You're not asking for confirmation." "No," he said. "Most people ask for confirmation." "You haven't been wrong yet," he said. "You found the crossing. You found the anchor. The compass has a better record than most navigational tools I've used. You've never seen the compass work." "I've seen you work," he said. "Same principle." She kept her eyes on the track ahead and told herself that the warmth in her chest was exertion. The morning was cold enough to make exertion generate warmth. That was a perfectly adequate explanation for the warmth in her chest. "The compass," said the other part of her, "does not point at exertion." She walked faster. They stopped at midday at the edge of a frozen stream, the first water they had crossed, the track skirting its bank for a 1/4 mile before a natural ford made crossing practical. The ice was thick at the edges, thin at the center where the current ran beneath it, and she spent a moment reading the pattern before choosing the line. She crossed. He followed her line exactly, weight in the same places, pace matched to hers. On the far bank she turned to check the crossing and found him already there, already looking north, already calibrated to the next section of track. "How long?" she said. "To your brother." Assuming the compass is accurate to within 20 miles, which it is, and assuming the pale court is holding him at a fixed location rather than moving him. "They are holding him fixed," he said. She looked at him. "The anchor can feel the peace in him now," he said. The incorporation established a connection. If they were moving him, the signal would be. He paused, finding the word. "Smeared." "It's not. It's stationary." She absorbed that. The anchor in him could feel her brother, which meant he could feel the direction as well as she could, which meant they had been walking for 3 hours with both of them knowing exactly where they were going, and the only navigator who had said anything about it was her compass. "You've been following it too," she said. "Since we left the walls," he said. "The anchor knows the piece. The piece is north-northwest, 40 to 50 miles. You didn't say anything. You were navigating," he said. It seemed presumptuous to narrate. She looked at him for a moment. "Tell me when you feel a change," she said. "In the signal. If they move him." Yes, he said. They moved on. The frost deepened as they went north. The birch trees thinned and gave way to stands of dark pine, dense and close, their branches carrying the weight of last night's frost in long crystal fringes that caught the pale midday sun and scattered it. The track narrowed. The silence changed, not the open, sky-over-marshes silence of the Ashveil territory but something more contained, more vertical, the specific hush of a forest that has been undisturbed for a very long time. She had been in forests like this before. She had never particularly liked them. They had a quality of attention that other landscapes didn't. The sense of being observed by something that was neither hostile nor friendly but simply old, simply present, simply noting the fact of your passing the way old things note the passing of new ones. You don't like the pine country, Draven said. She looked at him. I didn't say anything. No, he said. But you've checked your left flank 4 times in the last half mile and you haven't checked your right once. People check the flank that makes them nervous. She checked her right flank deliberately. Dense cover to the left, she said. Tactical assessment. The dense cover is symmetrical, he said. You're slightly more comfortable with the right side. I'm exactly equally comfortable with both sides. You're not, he said, without judgment, without particular interest, just as a statement of observed fact. The right side has a clearer sight line to the track behind us. You prefer to keep an exit in your peripheral vision. She walked in silence for a moment. You've been watching me, she said. I've been watching the terrain, he said. You're part of the terrain right now. That's a deeply unflattering way to describe a person. It was meant practically, not aesthetically, he said. And aesthetically, she said, before she could stop herself. A beat. She felt it land, felt the specific quality of the silence that followed it, the slight change in the air between them. Irrelevant, she told herself. That was an irrelevant question and you should not have asked it, and whatever he says in response you are not going to register it beyond the surface level of auditory processing. Aesthetically, he said, and his voice had a quality she hadn't heard in it before, careful, deliberate, as if he was choosing not just the words but the distance they traveled. You look like someone who has been running towards something for a very long time and has not yet decided what to do now that she's arrived. She kept walking. I haven't arrived anywhere, she said. I'm 40 miles from my brother and 6 pieces from finishing what someone else started 11 years ago. I know, he said. That's not what I meant. She did not ask what he meant. She was not going to ask what he meant. The pine forest held its deep, old silence around them and the compass pointed north and she put one foot in front of the other with the precision of someone who has decided that forward is the only available direction. They made camp at dusk. Not because they needed to stop. She could have run the night, had run harder nights on less preparation, but because the terrain ahead shifted at the edge of the tree line into open ground, and open ground at night with a pale court formation somewhere in the region was a worse proposition than a few hours of cold camp in good cover. She built the fire with the efficiency of someone who had built fires in worse conditions with worse materials. He gathered the wood without being asked, returning with exactly the right combination of dry pine and green branch backup, and she noted the selection without commenting on it because commenting on it would require acknowledging that he had done it correctly, which would require acknowledging that she had noticed, which led to a chain of acknowledgments she was not currently equipped to follow to its conclusion. They ate in the fire's small warmth, dried meat, hard bread, something from his pack that turned out to be a waxcloth bundle of soft cheese that was considerably more civilized than anything she had been eating for 8 months and which she therefore ate with more feeling than she intended to display. He did not comment on the feeling. She appreciated that more than she expected to. The fire settled into its lower, longer-burning configuration as the dark fully arrived, and the pine forest closed around them with its ancient, attending silence, and the cold came down from the open sky above the tree canopy in slow, deliberate waves. She pulled the wool from her pack. He had packed wool, which she had not had in 8 months, which was another thing she was not going to acknowledge the significance of, and sat with her back against a pine trunk and her knees drawn up and her blades within reach and the compass in her chest doing its steady, patient, northward work. He sat across the fire. Not close. Not far. She was trying not to keep measuring the distance. She was measuring it anyway. Tell me about your mother, he said. She looked at him across the fire. Why? Because she carried the compass before you, he said. And she chose to pass it through a bloodline she trusted. And you've been carrying it without knowing what it was for your whole life. And I think, he paused, I think you've been doing that with more than the compass. She looked at the fire. My mother, she said, was the most capable person I have ever known. She could navigate by the stars, by the land, by something she never explained and I never questioned because questioning it produced the specific smile of someone who knows something they are not ready to share yet. The compass. I didn't know that then. I thought it was instinct. I thought she was just extraordinary. In the way that children think their parents are extraordinary before they are old enough to understand the specific mechanism of the extraordinary. She was, he said, extraordinary. The mechanism doesn't change that. She looked at the fire for a moment. She would have liked this, she said, before she could stop herself. The anchor, the chamber, the way the land holds things. She would have stood in that room with her hands on the walls and she would have made the specific sound she made when she understood something that had been waiting to be understood. What sound? She almost smiled. Like something arriving, she said. Like a door opening that had been closed so long everyone forgot it was a door. The fire moved. The pine trees held their old silence. He looked at her across the small warmth between them and she looked back at him and the compass in her chest was doing something it hadn't done before, not pointing. Exactly, not the directional orientation she had lived with her whole life, but something adjacent to it, something that felt less like navigation and more like recognition. Stop, she told it. It did not stop. The pale court, she said, putting operational ground under her feet. When they moved on the Iron Veil 8 months ago. Why did it happen when it did? Why that night specifically? He was quiet for a moment, the quality of quiet that meant he had information and was deciding how much of it to offer. Tell me, she said. We intercepted a Pale Court communication 3 days before the attack, he said. A resonance-encoded message, which is how they communicate at distance. Corvin has been working on decoding their frequency for years. What did it say? That the compass had been located. He met her eyes. That it was moving south through the Iron Veil's territory. That the extraction team should be ready. She stared at him. They moved on the Iron Veil, she said slowly, because of me. Because I was there. Because you were there and they knew what you were carrying, he said. The Iron Veil didn't fall because of a strategic calculation about the southern strongholds. It fell because of me, she said. It fell because the Pale Court has been trying to retrieve the compass for 11 years and they finally had a location, he said. That's not the same as it being your fault. 70 people, she said. The Iron Veil had 70 people in the southern strongholds. I know. 70 people who are dead because I was in the wrong place at the wrong Seren time, and I didn't know what I was, and if I had known I would have. What? He said. Left. Gone way. Run way. You've been running for 8 months, and they've been faster than you every time. His voice was not harsh. It was not unkind. It had the specific quality of a truth being offered without softening because softening it would be a form of disrespect. The compass cannot be hidden. It cannot be removed. It cannot be extracted without killing you. The Pale Court knows all of that. They were never going to stop following it. That doesn't. No, he said. It doesn't. I'm not telling you it doesn't hurt. I'm telling you that the only thing that ends it is finishing what the researcher started. Neutralizing every piece. Taking the weapon apart. She looked at the fire. The other 5 carriers, she said. They're in danger. The same danger the Iron Veil was in. Yes. Because the Pale Court will follow the compass to every piece. Yes. Which means every day we spend on this road. I know, he said. That's why we're on it. She pulled the wool tighter around her shoulders and looked at the pine trees in the firelight and felt the specific weight of 70 people and 5 strangers and 1 brother and a compass she had been born carrying and had spent her whole life calling instinct. Why are you doing this? She said. Not the deflection version. Not the operational inquiry. The real question. The one she had declined to ask in the courtyard when he'd told her to ask it. He looked at her across the fire for a long moment. The anchor, he said, has been in my family for 4 generations. It lives in me the way the land lives in old trees, not as something I carry but as something I am. When it reached you in the courtyard tonight and found what it found. He stopped, looked at the fire. It wasn't surprised, he said. That's the thing. It found you the way it finds something it has been expecting. The way the land finds spring, not as an arrival but as a return. She did not answer. She did not trust herself to answer. I've been building walls for 11 years, he said. Iron walls and perimeter lines and a territory that has gotten smaller, not larger, because smaller is more defensible and defensible felt like the right priority. A pause. The anchor got bigger last night. The territory got bigger. And I think, he looked up from the fire and met her eyes. I think that's been waiting to happen for a long time too. The fire moved. The compass in her chest was not pointing north. It was pointing directly, precisely, with its usual calm and absolute certainty, across the 6 feet of pine-scented dark between them. Oh, she thought. Oh, that's what it's been doing. Not 8 months. Not since the chamber. Not since the shelf. Not since the unlocked bolt. Her whole life. The compass in her chest, that quiet and constant orientation she had spent 30 years calling instinct, calling tactical reasoning, calling anything except what it was, had always been pointing here. She looked at him across the fire. He looked back at her with those winter-gold eyes and the anchor's warmth behind them, and that expression, that quality of certainty, the load-bearing certainty, the certainty of a man who has been waiting for the world to catch up to something he already knows, and said nothing. He didn't need to say anything. She looked away. She looked at the pine trees and the dark and the frost coming down from the open sky and the road north that still had 40 miles on it and a brother at the end of it and 5 strangers and the pale court somewhere in the region regrouping with a larger formation and everything that still needed doing before anything else could be anything. We should sleep, she said. Yes, he said. In shifts. 2 hours each. I'll take first watch. All right. He pulled his own wool from his pack and settled back against the pine on his side of the fire with the ease of a man who had slept in worse places in worse company, and closed his eyes, and was quiet. She sat with her back against her pine and her blades within reach and the fire between them and the compass doing what it had always done, pointing with its quiet, infuriating, absolute certainty at the thing it had always been pointing at. She sat watch for 2 hours. She did not sleep well when it was her turn. The cold was perfectly adequate as an explanation for that. She woke to his hand on her shoulder. Not shaking. Not urgent. Just present. A warm weight through the wool, brief and deliberate. The specific contact of someone who has decided to wake a person gently enough that the instinct to reach for a blade has time to be assessed and stood down before the hand connects with the person offering it. She had her blade in her hand anyway. He was already back on his side of the fire, which had been rebuilt and was burning cleanly, and the pre-dawn grey was beginning its slow negotiation with the pine canopy overhead. Signal change, he said. She was on her feet before the sleep had fully cleared. My brother. Moving, he said. Not fast. Not in distress. The signal isn't distressed, it's just, he looked north. Deliberate. Like someone being moved with purpose. They are relocating him. Or, he looked at her. Or something changed that made them move him. She felt the compass. North-northwest, the way it had always been, but with a quality of urgency now that was new, the needle pull of something that has been stationary and is suddenly in motion. How far did we close last night? She said. 20 miles in yesterday's light, he said. 32 remaining. We need to run. Yes. She packed in 40 seconds, the practiced efficiency of 8 months, everything in its place by muscle memory, and he packed beside her in roughly the same time. And she noted the parallel without commenting on it and told herself firmly that the parallel meant nothing except that they had both been living compact, mobile lives. The compass pulled. She ran. He ran beside her, not behind, not ahead, beside, and the pine forest accepted them at pace with its ancient, attending silence, and the frost-hard ground rang under their feet like a struck bell, and 40 miles of cold northern road unrolled ahead of them toward a brother who was moving in a pale court that was changing its position and everything that still needed doing before anything else could be anything. And somewhere in the space between running and the compass and the cold, clean air and the sound of him breathing beside her with the same rhythm she had been counting her own heartbeat against for 3 days without knowing why. She stopped trying to call it something it wasn't. The compass pointed. She followed. She had always followed. Chapter 10. They ran 32 miles in 6 hours. Not continuously. The terrain demanded otherwise. The pine forest gave way at the 50-mile mark to a stretch of broken highland, frost-shattered rock rising in uneven shelves that forced them off pace and onto something more careful, more considered. The kind of movement that costs more than running because it requires the body to be both fast and precise simultaneously. She navigated it without slowing. He matched her without comment. By the time the highland dropped back into tree cover, older trees now, dark and wide-trunked, the kind that had been standing long enough to remember something, the compass had shifted. North-northwest had become almost due north. Her brother had stopped moving. His stationary again, Draven said. He had said it at the same moment she felt it, that settling of the needle, that return to fixed rather than tracking. She had not been surprised that he felt it simultaneously. She had stopped being surprised by the things the anchor knew at roughly the same time she had stopped being surprised by him, which was sometime around the pine forest fire and the question she had finally asked and the answer she had not entirely known what to do with. How far? She said. 8 miles. Maybe 9. He's been moved closer to us, she said. We were 32 miles at dawn. We've covered 24. He shouldn't be only 8 miles out. No, Draven said. He shouldn't. They had both stopped running. They stood at the edge of the old tree cover where the ground leveled out and the light through the canopy changed, thinner, grayer, carrying the specific quality of light that travels through dense old growth and arrives stripped of its warmth. She looked at the trees ahead. They moved him toward us, she said. Yes. That's not relocation, she said. Relocation moves a target away from the threat. Moving him toward us is an invitation, Draven said. The word landed in the cold air between them and stayed there. She had been running toward her brother for 24 miles with the compass pulling and the urgency of a signal in motion and the specific focused energy of someone finally closing the distance on the thing they had been moving toward for 8 months. And she had not, she realized with a cold and precise clarity, stopped to ask why the distance was closing faster than the mathematics required. They knew we were coming, she said. They've known since the walls, he said. The anchor connection, the incorporation. When the anchor reached your brother, it established a resonance link, a two-way link. She looked at him. They can feel the anchor now, she said. The way we can feel the peace, he said. Yes, they've been tracking us since the chamber. And they moved him closer because the compass only points, he said. It doesn't assess what's waiting at the destination. She was quiet for a moment. The old trees stood around them with their wide, dark trunks and their long memory and their specific kind of patience that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with having been present for long enough that most urgencies had revealed themselves as temporary. She was not feeling patient. She was feeling the specific cold focus that arrived when a situation had been redefined and the redefinition required a complete reassessment of every assumption that had gotten you to this point. Walk me through it, she said. Their calculation. He looked north. The compass carrier and the living anchor, together, heading for the encoded piece. That's the most dangerous combination the Pale Court can face, the only thing that can complete the neutralization sequence. Separately, we're manageable. The compass without the anchor can locate but not extract. The anchor without the compass can absorb but not find. Together we're the complete mechanism, she said. Together we're the thing that ends them, he said. So they move the piece we're following to a location of their choosing. They use your brother as the positioning element. We follow the compass directly into whatever they've arranged. A killing ground, she said. Or a capture ground, he said. The compass can't be extracted. They need it alive. They need me alive, she said. They don't need you. He looked at her. No, he said. They don't. She held his gaze. Then you don't go in, she said. That's not. Listen to me, she said. They've set this up to take us both. The anchor and the compass, together, at a location they control, with whatever formation size they've assembled since the walls. If we walk in as a unit, we give them exactly what they want. But if the anchor doesn't come, he said, you go into a Pale Court killing ground alone. I've been alone for 8 months. That's not an argument for continuing the pattern, he said. It's an argument for the fact that I can do it, she said. I can get to my brother. I know the compass, I know Pale Court formations, I know the chest strike and the court arm approach and every other piece of field intelligence the Iron Veil spent 20 years compiling. I go in alone, I get to my brother, I get out. And the extraction, he said. The piece in your brother. Without the anchor. She was quiet. You can't extract it without me, he said. No, she said. But I can get him out. Get him away from them. The extraction can happen later, somewhere. Somewhere they are not already positioned and waiting, he said. Which is exactly what this location is. Which is exactly why they moved him there. He looked at her steadily. They are not going to let you walk back out, Seren. This is not a retrieval anymore. This is a terminus. They've decided that if they can't have the compass, they will remove the compass. I know, she said. Then why are you trying to send me away? She looked at the old trees. She looked at the gray light coming through them and the frost on the dark bark and the compass in her chest pointing north with its calm and absolute certainty and the specific weight of everything that was waiting 8 miles in that direction. Because you have a pack, she said. You have a territory. You have a bond that 32 wolves depend on and an anchor that is the only reason those wolves have had walls to come home to for 11 years. She looked at him. And you don't owe me enough for that to be a reasonable cost. A silence fell. The old trees stood in it. You think this is about what I owe you, he said. It should be, she said. That's how these calculations work. Operational asset value against risk exposure. I'm one person with a compass. Yo. Don't, he said. The load-bearing structure of 32 lives. Seren. And the anchor that just got stronger last night, which means the pack is more protected now than it was before I arrived, which means Corvin has the best possible. Stop doing the arithmetic, he said. She stopped. He looked at her with the winter-gold depth and the anchor's warmth and the load-bearing certainty, and he said, I know what you're doing. You've been doing it since the shelf. Running the numbers on every exchange. Every decision. Every moment where something moved closer than 6 feet. He paused. You're very good at arithmetic. It's a useful skill. It's a way of keeping yourself at operational distance from the things that scare you, he said. And I understand why. You've been running alone for 8 months with 70 deaths behind you that you've been carrying as your own. I understand the arithmetic. I'm telling you to stop doing it. She looked at him. This isn't about asset value, he said. It's not about what I owe. It's not about the pack or the territory or the calculus of who matters more in an operational framework. He took 1 step forward, not to 6 feet, closer, 4 feet, the shelf distance, the courtyard distance. You know what the anchor found in the chamber. You know what the compass has been pointing at. You've known it since the fire last night, and you've been running the arithmetic on it ever since because the arithmetic feels safer than the alternative. The alternative isn't. It is, he said. And you know it is. And I'm not going to stand in an old forest 8 miles from a pale court trap and pretend it isn't because it's inconvenient timing. She looked at him for a long moment. The compass was pointing at him with the same calm certainty it pointed north, and she was tired. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with 24 miles of running and everything to do with 30 years of calling the compass something it wasn't. The timing is genuinely terrible, she said. The worst, he agreed. I've considered better scenarios. We have a pale court trap 8 miles ahead. Yes. And a brother who needs extracting and 5 other carries after that and a weapon to neutralize An. Yes, he said. All of that. Also this. He took the last step, the step that covered the remaining distance between 4 feet and something smaller, and she looked up at him in the gray old forest light with the compass finally, fully, unambiguously pointing and said nothing, because there was nothing left that the arithmetic could do with what was happening. He raised one hand, slowly, with the specific deliberateness of someone who is making a choice and wants the choice to be visible. He pressed his palm flat against her sternum, not her heart, not a gesture of claiming, but the exact point where the compass lived, where the orientation had been sitting for 30 years, warm and patient and pointing. She felt the anchor's pulse against her skin through his hand. Her pulse, answering it. The same rhythm. It's been pointing here, he said, since before either of us knew what here was. She looked at him. Yes, she said. Then we go in together, he said. And we come out together. And the arithmetic is finished. She put her hand over his. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the anchor's warmth and the compass's recognition and the specific weight of something that had been waiting a very long time to be acknowledged arriving, finally, without performance or deflection or the operational distance she had been using as a substitute for being present. Then she stepped back. If we're going in together, she said, we're going in with a plan. Yes, he said. A real plan. Not we run at the problem and use iron blades and hope the anchor resonance destabilizes their formation. That was working fairly well on the shelf. We were lucky on the shelf. We were good on the shelf, he said. There's a difference. She almost made the sound again. This time she let it happen. Barely, briefly, a small involuntary acknowledgement of the specific quality of him, and turned north before he could see the rest of it. 8 miles, she said. Tell me everything the anchor can feel about the signal. Location, density, containment type. I'll map the formation from what I know about Pale Court tactical deployment at terminus operations. He fell into step beside her. Not 6 feet. Closer. She did not move away. The signal is in a fixed structure, he said. Not a tent, not a mobile containment. Something with walls. Stone, I think. The anchor reads stone differently from earth. Pale Court hold structures are always stone, she said. They use resonance to seal the mortar. Makes the walls functionally impassable to anything that runs on a natural frequency. Except the anchor, he said. Except the anchor, she agreed. Which is why they moved him toward us. They need the anchor to come to them. A stone-sealed structure blocks the anchor's reach from outside. The incorporation can't happen through the walls. So they need us inside. They need us inside, she said. Which means there's an entrance they are leaving accessible. An invitation that looks like a vulnerability. And the formation, he said. Outside the structure. Yes. The anchor and compass approaching together. They'll have the perimeter ringed. Standard terminus deployment is a layered ring. Outermost layer is the fast movers, the hunters we've seen before. Middle layer is the cord workers. Inner layer, she paused. Inner layer is what? He said. Anchors, she said. Pale Court anchors. Not territorial. They don't have territorial resonance the way wolves do. But they have their own version of it. Fixed-point resonance emitters that create a suppression field. Suppression of what? Of the pack bond, she said. If they get the field active before you access the anchor's full power, the alpha resonance, the kind that hit the hunters on the shelf, the suppression dampens it. Makes the anchor's reach shorter, he said. Manageable, she said. From their perspective. He was quiet for a moment, processing. How do we counter the suppression field? He said. You have to be inside it before they activate it, she said. Once it's active, the anchor can't punch through from outside. But from inside. The anchor is already at full reach, he said. The field can't suppress what's already active inside the boundary. Yes. Which means we have to be inside the perimeter before they know we're there, he said. Which means we can't come in as ourselves. She looked at him. He looked at her. The wolf form, she said. They are tracking the compass, he said. Not the wolf pack frequency. If I shift in you. If I run inside your formation, she said. They'll read the approach as a single alpha and pack, not as the compass carrier and the living anchor together. It won't hold long, she said. The moment we're inside the perimeter they'll feel the compass. It doesn't need to hold long, he said. It needs to hold long enough for us to be inside the suppression field before they activate it. Once we're inside, you hit them with the full anchor resonance before the field comes up, she said. And I get to my brother. And we extract the piece. And we get out, she said. Together, he said. Together, she said. They looked at each other. This plan, she said, has 4 distinct points at which everything could go wrong simultaneously. Yes, he said. The timing window between entering the perimeter and the suppression field activating is probably less than 30 seconds. Yes. And we're relying on the Pale Court not recognizing the compass frequency inside a wolf pack formation, which only works if the masking holds, and my masking compound is 12 hours old, Anne. And we've done harder things with worse preparation, he said. She thought about the marsh. About 6 hours and 40 minutes on degraded paste with 32 wolves around her and pale gold eyes tilting an ear at a cypress landing. Yes, she said. We have. He shifted at the 4-mile mark. She had seen it twice before, had studied it, catalogued it, told herself she had filed it under tactical awareness of alpha capabilities. Standing 4 feet away from it in an old forest with the grey light coming down through wide dark trunks, she revised the filing. There was no taxonomy adequate for watching the Storm King shift. The charcoal and silver wolf that stood before her in the frostlit dark was different from the wolf she had run beside for 3 days in the marsh. Not in form. The form was the same, mountain-shouldered and luminescent at the fur tips with the anchor's warmth, eyes gone to that deep, living white that was not absence but presence. Different in something she felt rather than saw. The incorporation. The anchor had gotten bigger. The wolf had gotten bigger with it. Not physically. Not in any way a tape measure would confirm, but in the specific way that things get bigger when they have taken something in and become more fully what they were always going to be. He looked at her. She held his gaze, those white luminescent eyes, for a moment. Then she pulled the last of the marsh bind from the inner pocket of her pack where she had been conserving it since the stronghold. Half a dose. Old formula, the one her instructor had taught her, the one that smelled like bog iron and nightroot and 3 drops of wolf blood from a vial she'd been carrying for. She stopped. She looked at the vial. She looked at him. Of course, she thought. Of course the vial has been the same vial for 6 months. Of course the wolf blood in it is the specific frequency the compass found first. She had been carrying his blood for 6 months. She was going to think about that later. She applied the paste, quickly and thoroughly, covering every exposed surface, and the wolf, Draven, the Storm King, the anchor, the man who had said together in an old forest like it was the only available answer, watched her with those white eyes and waited. Ready, she said. The pack formed around them from the trees. She had not seen them arrive, had not heard them, had not tracked them, which under any other circumstances would have alarmed her considerably. But she understood now that they had not been following, had not run the 24 miles behind them at a distance. They had been called. The anchor had called them from the stronghold, from the bond, from the specific depth of connection that existed between a living territorial resonance and the pack it lived in. 4 of them, senior hunters, she recognized them from the courtyard, had come through the night and the frost and the broken highland without being asked in any language that words could carry. Because the bond had asked. Because the anchor had said need and they had answered here. She stood in the middle of them and the pace did its work and she was, again, a body among wolf bodies in a formation she had not belonged to until she had, and the compass in her chest pointed north with its usual certainty. North, and slightly left. Toward the stone-sealed structure. Toward her brother. Toward the pale court's carefully arranged terminus. 3 miles, she thought. 1 chance. 30 seconds inside the perimeter before the suppression field comes up. Let's go. The old trees gave way. She smelled the structure before she saw it, that specific pale court quality of sealed stone, resonance mortared, carrying the cold mineral scent of something that had been made impermeable by intention. And beneath it, faint and specific and unmistakable. Her brother. 8 months. 8 months of running and planning and carrying the compass and the weight of 70 dead and the encoded piece and the knowledge of what it would cost and what it required and what she would do when she finally got here. She kept her pace. She kept her tail angle. She kept everything correct. Don't react, she told herself, for the second time in her life, with the same words, in the same formation, about the same fundamental problem. Reacting is confessing. The structure emerged from the trees ahead, a low, wide building of grey stone, old, seamless in the specific way of pale court construction. No windows. 1 entrance, a dark opening in the south face. The invitation. The vulnerability that was not a vulnerability. Around the structure, in the frost-pale clearing, she counted. Outer ring, 8 hunters. The fast movers. Middle ring, 6 cord workers, the dark lengths already in their long pale hands. Inner ring, 4 fixed-point emitters. Stone pedestals, each carrying a resonance crystal she could feel from here, a pressure against the compass, a specific resistance, the beginning of the suppression field that was not yet active. Not yet active. 30 seconds. The formation moved into the clearing. The outer ring hunters looked up. She felt the moment of assessment. Felt it the way she had felt Draven's ear tilt at a cypress landing in the dark, the moment of something being noted and saved. We have 15 seconds, she thought. Maybe 20. The anchor moved. She felt it before she heard it, that deep, structural pulse rising through the bond, through the 4 wolves around her, through the frost-hard ground beneath her paws, through the compass in her chest that recognized the frequency and answered it. Not a sound. Not a wave. A breath, taken by something vast and warm and utterly certain of itself. The suppression crystals flickered. 10 seconds. She broke from the formation. Not toward the entrance, toward the inner ring, toward the nearest crystal pedestal, because the plan had 4 points at which everything could go wrong simultaneously, and the most critical was the crystals reaching activation before the anchor reached full power, and she had iron core blades and the chest strike and 8 months of very motivated practice. The first crystal went down in 4 seconds. The cord worker behind it came up in the same motion. She was already moving to the second pedestal. Behind her, the sound of the anchor releasing. It was different from the shelf. On the shelf, in the courtyard, the anchor's resonance had been the contained power of a territorial bond expressed in a specific place, aimed at a specific threat. Here, in the clearing, with 4 wolves carrying it and the incorporation's extra depth and no iron walls to define the boundary. It was not contained. It was not aimed. It went everywhere. She felt it move through her like the chamber's warmth scaled to something she didn't have words for. The land's own frequency suddenly present at full volume, the specific resonance of a territory that had just remembered it had no ceiling. The outer ring hunters staggered. 2 of them went down. The cord workers' dark lengths went slack and disordered, the suppression crystals on the remaining 2 pedestals screaming at a frequency she felt in her back teeth. She hit the second pedestal. Third. The last cord worker between her and the entrance came up fast, the dark length spinning, and she went under it, the gap between low and the cord's arc, the geometry that tall things couldn't cover, and the iron blade caught the cord arm as she came up through the movement, and the 4th pedestal went down in the same step. No suppression field. She hit the entrance at a run. The inside of the structure was not dark. That was the first thing. The pale quartz resonance sealed the stone, and the stone held a specific quality of cold illumination. Not warm, not welcoming, the light of something that has been sealed for a very long time and is lit only for the purpose of use. Her brother was at the far end of the single large room. Not in a cell. Not in chains. The pale court didn't use physical restraint, didn't need to. He was sitting on the stone floor in the specific posture of someone who had been held in a resonance suppression field for an extended period. Still conscious, still present, but with the slightly absent quality of a mind that has been running on diminished resources. Brennan. She crossed the room. She crossed it fast, and she was on her knees beside him before she had made a conscious decision to be, and his eyes found hers with the specific quality of recognition that cuts through even extended suppression, the specific quality of Seren, he said. His voice was rough. It was the best sound she had heard in 8 months. I know, she said. I know. I've got you. You look terrible, he said. You look worse, she said. You've been running, he said. You have the running face. You only make the running face when. Brennan. She took his face in her hands, the way their mother used to, checking, eyes tracking, pupils equal, color acceptable, the piece's resonance still present and encoded but not damaged, not extracted, still exactly where it had been, still his. I need you to hold on to me. Can you do that? Yes, he said. Whose? His eyes went past her to the entrance. She looked back. Draven stood in the entrance in human form. The shift had been fast. She had not seen it. She was beginning to accept that she would never see it coming, with the 4 wolves at his back and the courtyard's cold luminescence still in his eyes. He was looking at her brother with an expression that she recognized after a moment as the one he used when he was assessing a situation with the anchor as well as his eyes, reading the resonance, reading the piece, reading everything the stone room held. The piece is intact, he said. I can feel it from here. Yes, she said. We need to be quick. I know. The outer formation is down but not out, he said. We have maybe 4 minutes before they regroup. She looked at her brother. This is going to feel strange, she said. The extraction. It won't hurt. I need you to hear me say that. It won't hurt, but it will feel like something leaving that you didn't know was there. The thing they want, he said. Yes. You know what it is? Yes. Are you going to tell me? Later, she said. When we have time. When we're somewhere that isn't a pale court-hold structure with a regrouping formation outside. He looked past her again at Draven. Is he? Later, she said, and Draven made a sound from the entrance that might have been the very beginning of something that was not quite a laugh, and she ignored it completely and looked at her brother and said, Ready? Yes, he said. Hold on to me, she said. He took her hands. She pressed her right palm flat against the stone floor. Draven. He crossed the room. He crouched beside her, and she felt the anchor come up through the stone from his touch, that warm, deep, living pulse, filling the sealed room with the land's own frequency, pressing against the pale quartz cold illumination and finding it wanting. The peace in her brother responded. She felt it the way she had felt it in the chamber, the recognition, the anchor turning the encoding over, understanding the language. But this time it was not a distant reach through the rock and the bond in 40 miles of Northern Territory. This time it was right here, right under her hands, close enough to feel in the air between their faces. Accept it, she thought again. And the anchor breathed in. Brennan made a sound. Not pain. She had promised him not pain and she had been right. The anchor was too careful, too warm, too precise for pain. It was the sound of something releasing. The specific exhale of a body that has been carrying a weight it didn't know it was carrying. For a period so long it had stopped feeling like weight and started feeling like just the way things were. She felt it leave him. She felt the anchor take it in with that same warm, unhurried certainty, folding it into the territorial resonance the way it had folded the first piece, not reluctantly, not with effort, but with the ease of something coming home to itself. Draven's eyes went white. She was ready for it this time. She watched it happen, the anchor's full depth rising to the surface, the second piece adding its harmonic layer to the resonance she had felt building since the chamber, and she watched his expression for damage, for rejection, for the backlash she had been carrying the fear of since she had first understood what the extraction required. Nothing that wasn't incorporation. Nothing that wasn't the land getting bigger. Held, he said. She exhaled. Held, she confirmed. Brennan blinked at her. His eyes were clearer already, the suppression's fog lifting with the piece's removal, the piece having been, she understood now, the thing the suppression was interacting with. Without it, the field had nothing to work against. Can you walk? She said. I can run, he said, with the specific dignity of a 23-year-old who has been held in a resonance suppression field for 8 months and is not going to let that be the last thing that defines him. She almost wept. She did not weep. She pulled him to his feet and turned to the entrance and said to Draven, 4 minutes. 3 now, he said. Then let's go, she said. They went. The clearing outside the structure was not the clearing they had entered. Technically the geometry was the same, the frost-pale ground, the old trees at the edges, the grey sky overhead. But the pale court formation that had ringed it was reorganizing, and reorganizing pale court hunters had a specific quality that made the air feel different, thinner, carrying a charge she felt against her skin like the moment before lightning. The 4 wolves were holding the north exit, a gap in the tree line she had assessed on the approach as the most defensible egress. The outer ring hunters were up. 3 of them, on their feet, the wrong tall frames reconstituting their forward motion with that quality of patient, inevitable resumption. North, Draven said. North, she confirmed. Brennan ran between them, faster than she had expected, the suppression's lift already rebuilding his native speed, his face set with the expression of a 23-year-old who can name every bird in the eastern marshes and has just decided that none of them are as important as the tree line 40 yards ahead. The 3 hunters came. Draven shifted mid-stride. She had been expecting it this time. She had been watching for it, had been ready for the specific violence of the change, and she used the half-second it bought. The hunter's attention fractured by the shift, by the anchor's power rising to the surface in the clearing with no suppression field to dampen it, to pull her brother left, cut the angle, close the distance to the tree line by 10 yards while the wolves engaged. 20 yards. 10. The anchor's resonance hit the clearing like the chamber's warmth hitting a cold room, total and immediate and not unkind, but completely indifferent to the preferences of the things it was displacing. The 3 hunters went back. Not down. She had stopped expecting the anchor to be enough to put them down, had recalibrated to back as the relevant unit of measurement. But back, far enough, long enough. 5 yards. The trees. She pulled Brennan through the gap in the tree line, into the old forest's dark, and the wolves came through behind them, and Draven, the charcoal and silver wolf, white-eyed and luminescent at the fur tips, came last. She ran. They all ran. The compass pointed south. Not north. Not toward the remaining 5 pieces. Not yet. South. Toward the stronghold. Toward the iron walls. Toward home. And she caught the word in her mind and looked at it with the part of her that had been doing arithmetic for 30 years and expected to want to revise it. She didn't want to revise it. She ran south, with her brother beside her and the wolves around her and the Storm King at the back of the formation covering the retreat, and the compass pointed with its calm and absolute certainty at all of it. At the anchor, at the territory, at the specific direction of a life that had been orienting towards something for 30 years and had finally, at the cost of 8 months and 70 dead and a cord burn and a brother held in a stone room with no windows, arrived. They ran for an hour before Draven shifted back. She heard it happen behind her, the fast, total, indifferent violence of it, and then footsteps, human, matching her pace within 3 strides. She looked at him. He was breathing hard. The 2 incorporations were in him now. She could see it in his eyes, the added depth, the double harmonic layer, the anchor's warmth at a new register. He looked like someone who had been carrying a weight and added to it and found that the additional weight was not a burden but a clarification, a becoming. He looked like what he was always going to be. Damage, she said. None, he said. You're certain? The bond is clear, he said. The pack is clear. The anchor is. He paused. Large. Large, she said. That's the most accurate word I have. Beside her, Brennan looked between them with the specific expression of a 23-year-old processing a significant amount of new information at pace. So, he said. Later, she said. You keep saying later. I keep meaning it. Is he? Brennan began. Later, she and Draven said, simultaneously. Brennan looked at the sky. Right, he said. They ran. The stronghold appeared through the birch trees as the light failed. She saw it differently this time, not as a structure, not as a positional element in an operational plan, not as the destination of a compass she had been following her whole life without knowing it. She saw it as what it was. Dark basalt, heat fused at the joints. 40 feet of deliberate, careful, living intention. Towers at each corner that were not decorative. A gate that was iron, all iron, standing open. Corvin had known they were coming, the bond had told him, the anchor had said here they come, and he had opened the gate without being asked. The pack was in the courtyard. All of them. 31 wolves in human form, standing in the cold evening air, and when the formation came through the gate, the specific quality of the silence that fell was not tension and not relief, but something more complicated than either. The sound of a bond that has been stretched thin for a day and is returning to its full length, settling back into its natural shape. Corvin looked at Draven. He looked at the two incorporations in his eyes. He looked at Brennan. He looked at her. North wall is fully sealed, he said. Pack is intact. 3 minor injuries from last night, all functional. A beat. My king. Well done, Draven said. Corvin looked at her one more time. 78%, he said. She held his gaze. Tonight it was higher, she said. Something in his expression did what it had done at the gate that morning. That specific adjustment of someone who has been given a number they respect. He stepped back. Draven looked at her. South Tower, he said. My brother needs. Room next to yours, he said. Already prepared. She looked at him. When? She said. When we left this morning, he said. Before I knew we were going anywhere. She held his gaze in the courtyard's torchlight for a long moment, with the pack around them and her brother beside her and the iron walls holding the dark at bay and the compass in her chest pointing, with its usual calm and absolute certainty, at the man in front of her. You're going to have to stop doing that, she said. Preparing for situations before they are confirmed. Knowing things, she said. Before I'm ready for you to know them. He looked at her with the winter gold depth and the anchor's double warmth and the load-bearing certainty. You were ready, he said. You've been ready for a long time. You just needed to arrive. She looked at him. She looked at the iron walls and the torchlight and the open gate that was already swinging closed behind them, iron on iron, the sound of something sealed and held and kept. 5 more pieces, she said. 5 more, he said. 5 more carriers. 5 more incorporations. 5 more pale court formations between here and the end of it. Yes. And then it's done, she said. The weapon is neutralized. Your territory is permanent. My brother is safe. The pale court loses the only thing they've been building for 11 years. Yes, he said. And then what? She looked at him. The question hung in the torchlit courtyard with the pack and the iron walls and the compass doing its quiet, patient, permanent work. I don't know, she said. I've never had an and then before. No, he said. Neither have I. He looked at her steadily, with the winter gold depth, with the certainty. I find I'm not opposed to finding out, he said. She looked at him for one long moment. Neither am I, she said. The gate closed. Iron on iron. The bolt came home. Not from the outside. From within. Chapter 11. She slept for 14 hours. She knew this because Brennan told her, with the specific satisfaction of a younger brother who has been waiting 8 months for an opportunity to be insufferable about something, and because the light in the South Tower room when she woke was the flat, high light of late morning rather than the grey pre-dawn she had been waking to for so long that pre-dawn had begun to feel like her natural habitat. She lay still for a moment before opening her eyes fully. The fire in the iron grate had been rebuilt. Recently, the warmth was fresh. Someone had been in the room while she slept and tended it without waking her. The bolt on the door was still where she had left it the night before. Unlocked. She looked at it for a moment. Then she got up. Brennan was in the great hall. He was sitting at the long table with a bowl of something hot in front of him and 3 of the pack's younger wolves arranged at a respectful distance, watching him with the specific expression of people who have been told not to overwhelm the guest but are finding the instruction difficult to follow. He looked better, the suppression's fog almost entirely gone now, his color restored, his eyes carrying the quality of attentiveness that she had missed without knowing how much she had missed it. He looked up when she came through the door. He looked at her face. "You slept," he said. 14 hours, apparently. 15, he said. I rounded down to be kind. She sat across from him. One of the young wolves. She thought his name was Aldrich's apprentice. She had not yet learned all the names. Appeared at her elbow with a bowl matching Brennan's, and she accepted it without looking up because looking up would require acknowledging that she was being looked after in a way she had not been looked after in 8 months, and she was not yet ready to do that with her face. "How do you feel?" she said. "Strange," Brennan said. "Like something I was so used to I couldn't feel it anymore is gone. Like walking after you've been carrying a heavy pack for so long you forgot what your natural gait felt like." "That's accurate," she said. "That's exactly what it is." He looked at her. 8 months, he said. "Yes. You've been running for 8 months." "Yes. Toward here." She looked at the bowl. "The compass," she said. "I'll explain it properly. I'll explain all of it. The researcher, the pieces, the anchor, what I know about the remaining 5 carriers. I'll tell you everything. Later. Now, if you want." He tilted his head, studying her with the specific attention of a person who has known her for 23 years and can read the topography of her silences. "You're different," he said. "I've been running for 8 months. People change when." "Not that kind of different," he said. "Different like something stopped. Like something that was always moving and you just settled." She looked at him. "The compass," she said. "Is that what we're calling it?" he said. She held his gaze. "Yes," she said. "That's what we're calling it." He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he picked up his spoon and returned to his bowl with the expression of a 23-year-old who has assessed the situation, arrived at his own conclusions, and decided they can wait until the situation is ready to announce itself. "These wolves," he said, "are extremely good at soup." "I know," she said. "The big tawny one, Corvin. What about him?" "He looks at you," Brennan said, "like you are variable he's still calculating. He looks at everyone like that. He looks at you like the calculation keeps coming out to a number he didn't expect," Brennan said, "and he's not sure yet whether to be relieved or concerned." She ate her soup. She found Draven on the south wall. Not the repaired breach. That was the north face, Corvin's domain this morning, the sounds of ceiling work carrying across the courtyard in regular, methodical intervals. The south wall was intact, had always been intact, and it looked out over the approach she had come in on 4 days ago now, the birch trees pale and still in the late morning light, the frost-hard ground carrying the long shadows of a sun that had climbed but not yet warmed. He was standing with his forearms on the parapet, looking south. She climbed the wall stairs and stood beside him. Not 6 feet. She had stopped measuring 6 feet sometime around the pine forest fire. She was aware of that. She had not yet decided what to do with the awareness except to let it be what it was, which was a departure from her standard operating procedure but felt, in the specific way that true things feel, like the correct approach. He looked at her when she arrived. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her since the shelf, with that quality of the anchor knowing something and communicating it through the eyes of the man it lived in, but with something added now, something that the 14 hours and the bolt and the soup and the 14 hours had allowed to surface. Warmth. Not the anchor's warmth, not the chamber's warmth. Personal warmth. The specific warmth of someone who has been waiting for something and watched it arrive and is still, quietly, not quite believing that it has. "You slept," he said. "Apparently 15 hours. 14, he said. Brennan rounded up. She looked at him. He looked at the birch trees. "How's the shoulder?" she said. "Healed," he said. "Completely. The incorporation seems to have," he paused, finding the word, "accelerated things. The anchor is more present in the body than it was before. The healing rate has changed." "That's consistent with the theory," she said. "The incorporation strengthens all anchor functions, not just resonance and reach. The physical aspects." "Yes," he said. "I've been noticing." She looked at the birch trees. "There's something I should have told you," she said. "Before the chamber. Before the extraction." He waited. "The compass," she said. "When it brought me here." When I followed it into the Ashveil territory and into your pack and toward the anchor, I told you I thought it was tactical reasoning. That I had assessed the Ashveil anchor as the strongest in 400 miles and the approach as the most viable for the extraction. Yes. That was true, she said. All of that was true. But the compass doesn't just point at what I need. It was never designed to just point at what I need. He turned to look at her. The researcher who built it, she said. She didn't just encode a directional tool. She encoded a recognition mechanism. Something that would find not just the pieces but the context for the pieces. The right conditions. She stopped. The right person, he said. The right anchor, she said. The living anchor, not just the territorial one. The alpha who could carry the incorporations. The bond strong enough to hold the weight of all 6 pieces without fracturing. She looked at him. She built the compass to find the anchor it needed. She built it to find you. He looked at her steadily. The anchor found you the same way, he said. In the courtyard. The way it reaches Pack. The way it reached nothing else in 4 generations. Yes. 2 things built to find each other, he said. 2 things built from the same framework, she said. The anchor and the compass. The same theoretical origin. The same researcher, 11 years ago, in this chamber, with her hands on this stone. She knew, he said. I think she knew everything, Seren said. I think she planned everything. The distribution of the pieces. The compass in the bloodline. The incorporation sequence. All of it, planned, from the beginning, to bring the pieces home in the right order with the right mechanism. She just didn't plan who would be alive to carry it, he said. No, Seren said. She couldn't have known that. She couldn't have known it would take 11 years. That the iron veil would fall. That my mother would be gone before she could tell me what I was carrying. But the compass found its way regardless. The compass found its way regardless, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. The wintergold depth, the anchor's double warmth, the certainty that she had stopped finding unsettling and had started finding something she did not yet have the correct word for. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't. I used your pack, she said. I ran into your territory with a plan that put your wolves in the path of a 17-hunter breach formation and your stronghold in the middle of a pale court terminus operation, and I didn't ask, I didn't petition, I didn't. You were keeping a family alive, he said. You were carrying something the researcher trusted to a bloodline she believed in, and you were doing the only thing that could end it. And you were doing it alone because alone was the only option available to you. He looked at her. I'm not owed an apology for being the option that became available. She held his gaze. The pack, she said. The wolves who went down in the courtyard. Aldrich. The others. All functional, he said. All here. All of whom, if you told them what the breach was for, what the incorporations mean for the anchor, for the territory, for the permanence of everything they've been defending, would tell you the cost was acceptable. That's their choice to make. Yes, he said. And I know my pack. She looked at the birch trees. 5 more, she said. 5 more. 5 more carriers, 5 more incorporations, 5 more pale court formations between here and the end of it. She paused. The pale court lost 2 pieces last night. They know what we're doing. Every subsequent extraction is going to be escalating. Yes. They'll move on the remaining carriers the moment they regroup from last night, she said. Which means we have a window, small, closing, to find the carriers before the pale court does. How long? She thought of the compass, of the 5 signals it carried, each one specific, each one at a felt distance and direction she had lived with for so long she could navigate by them in her sleep. One is close, she said. 2 days, maybe 3, if the carrier is stationary. One of the others is months away, deep in the eastern territories, across the salt flats. She looked at him. The remaining 3 are scattered. Some in packed territories, some outside. Some in places the pale court may already be moving on. Then we don't start with the close one, he said. She looked at him. We start with the one that's most at risk, he said. Not the easiest access. The most urgent. She thought of the compass, of the 5 signals, their quality, their specific resonance. One of them had been carrying a quality she had not wanted to examine too closely, a faint instability that she had been attributing to distance. She examined it now. The Eastern Territories, she said slowly. The one I said was months away. Is it months away because of distance or because of what's between here and there? Both, she said. But the signal, she stopped. The signal has been degrading. Slowly. Over weeks. I thought it was static interference. The salt flats distort resonance across the eastern range. But if the pale court has already located the carrier. The signal degrades when the pale court applies pressure, he said. The suppression they used on your brother. Yes. Then months is what we have if nothing has changed. And if something has changed, she said, then months is more than we have. He looked at her. She looked at him. We need more information, she said. The compass tells me direction and distance and a felt quality of the signal, but it doesn't tell me. What's happening at the destination, he said. No. The anchor can reach further now, he said. The incorporations have extended the territorial resonance. I can feel the second piece, your brother's piece, clearly from here. The reach is longer than it's ever been. How much longer? Significantly, he said. The Eastern Territories are 300 miles. I know. The anchor's reach, even significantly extended. I don't know, he said. I've never tested the boundary. I don't know where the new limit is. He looked at her steadily. I know what the limit was. I know what the incorporations have done to the depth. I don't know where the ceiling is yet. She looked at the birch trees. The chamber, she said. Yes. If the reach is longer from the chamber, the concentrated point, we might be able to feel the eastern signal from here, he said. Assess its quality. Assess whether it's stationary or under pressure. And if it's under pressure, then we change the sequence, he said. We go east first, regardless of the distance. She looked at him for a moment. That's a 300-mile approach to a salt-flat territory that neither of us has operational intelligence on, with a pale court formation of unknown size and a carrier we've never met and a suppression field that. Yes, he said. Do you want to go look at the anchor first or continue listing the obstacles? She looked at him. She was aware, in the specific way that she had become aware of things since the forest fire and the compass's honest pointing, that the expression on her face was doing something she had not authorized it to do. Something that had a quality of involuntary warmth to it. Something that the Seren of 8 months ago, the Seren who had spent 2 years in the Iron Veil learning to keep everything at operational distance, would have considered a significant security liability. The Seren of right now was finding it difficult to locate the energy to care about that. The anchor, she said. The chamber was different in daylight. Not in structure, the dark basalt walls, the arched ceiling, the pulsing luminescence that was the anchor's living warmth. All of that was the same. But the quality of the light coming down the stairs from above and the quality of the anchor's response to their arrival had both changed in ways she felt in her chest before she understood them in her mind. 2 incorporations. The chamber knew. The pulse in the walls was richer, a harmonic depth that had not been there 3 days ago, when she had stood in this room for the first time with her palms against the warm basalt and felt the anchor for the first time and understood, not theoretically but actually, what she was asking him to risk. She put her palms against the wall now. The anchor responded immediately, warm and certain and carrying those 2 new layers, recognizing her the way it had recognized her in the courtyard, with that specific quality of the compass and the anchor speaking the same language. Ready, she said. He pressed his palm to the wall beside hers. The anchor rose. She felt it move outward, not the directed reach of the extraction, aimed at a specific target, but an exploratory pulse, wide and warm, testing the new extent of itself the way a person tests the extent of a healed wound. How far does it go? What does it find? She gave it the direction. Not words. Not an instruction. Simply the felt quality of the Eastern signal, that specific resonance, one of the 5 she had been carrying for 30 years, the faint instability she had been not examining for weeks. She offered it to the anchor the way she had offered her brother's signal in the first extraction, as a compass heading, a frequency, a direction. The anchor took it, and reached. She felt it go, that warm, living pulse extending outward through the rock and the territory and beyond the territory, past the limits of what she had been told was possible and into the range that the incorporations had opened. Farther than the stronghold. Farther than the birch trees and the marsh and the 32 miles of cold northern road. East. She felt the salt flats in it, the specific resonance distortion she had described, the way the mineral expanse scrambled frequencies across the eastern range. The anchor moved through it differently than she would have predicted. Not struggling. Not degrading. Simply, adjusting, the way a skilled navigator adjusts to difficult terrain without losing the route. The incorporations, She understood. The Pale Court's own encoded framework, now living inside the anchor, teaching it how to move through the frequencies the Pale Court used. Teaching it the very techniques that had been designed to block it. Clever, she thought, with a feeling directed at the long-dead researcher who had planned all of this from a chamber just like this one, 11 years ago. Very, very clever. The Eastern signal came up. She felt it the moment the anchor found it, that specific resonance, that particular carrier, one of 5 she had navigated by for 30 years. The felt quality of it, close and clear. She went still. Draven. I feel it, he said. Tell me what you feel. Pressure, he said. The suppression frequency. The same as your brother's signal had. That quality of a resonance being held under something. How long, she said. How long has it been under pressure? I can't tell duration, he said. But the signal is, he paused. The signal is narrowing. The way a flame narrows when the air is being taken from it. She looked at the wall. They already have the carrier, she said. Yes. And they've had them long enough for the suppression to have progressed to. To that stage, he said. Yes. She pulled her hand from the wall. She stood in the anchor chamber with the warm basalt at her back and the 5 signals in her chest and the specific weight of a plan that had just been redefined by a fact she had been afraid to examine. We leave today, she said. Yes. Not at dawn. Today. This afternoon. As soon as. The pack needs to know, he said. Corvin needs to know the departure protocol. How long does that take? An hour, he said. Less. And the approach, she said. 300 miles. The salt flats. We need whatever operational intelligence the anchor gathered on the formation size. You felt the suppression frequency. Could you feel the number of emitters? The pattern of the field. 4 emitters, he said. Arranged in a square. Tight spacing. Tighter than the formation last night. They've learned from the breach. Tighter spacing means a smaller suppression field, she said. Which means a smaller hold structure. Which means fewer hunters inside the perimeter. But the outer formation. Unknown, she said. The anchor couldn't read the outer formation. The outer formation is beyond the suppression field's boundary, he said. The field blocks outward reach as well as inward. So we know what's inside and not what's outside. Yes, she thought. We approach from below the field's frequency range, she said. The anchor can modulate its resonance. The incorporations gave it the Pale Court's frequency framework. If we come in at the lower edge of the suppression range rather than at full pack resonance, we're beneath the threshold that triggers the field's activation response, he said. Yes, we get inside the perimeter without the emitters activating. The wolf form again. The wolf form again. She looked at him. Does the pack have the range for 300 miles? The pack isn't coming, he said. She looked at him. Not the full pack, he said. Corvin stays. The pack stays. The anchor is in me, not in them. The pack's presence helps on home ground, but at 300 miles, in unknown territory, a large formation is a liability. Then who? You and I, he said. The compass and the anchor. The complete mechanism. 2 people, she said. Into a Pale Court hold with an unknown outer formation. We've done worse with worse odds, he said. You keep saying that. It keeps being true, he said. She looked at him. She thought of the shelf, where she had been caught and not cowered. She thought of the courtyard, where the formation had held at cost. She thought of the stone room in the north and her brother's eyes finding hers with the quality of recognition that cuts through everything, and the anchor breathing in, and Draven's eyes going white with the warmth of a territory that had just gotten larger. There's something I want to do, she said, before we leave. What? She looked at the chamber walls, at the pulsing luminescence, the double harmonic warmth, the living heart of a territory that had been built over 4 generations by people who understood that some things were worth the cost of defending them. I want to touch the wall, she said. Not for the anchor, not for the reach, not for any operational reason. She pressed her palm flat against the warm basalt. Not with purpose, not with direction, just present. Just her hand and the wall and the anchor's warmth responding to the compass's recognition with that quality she had come to know as the land knowing her name. When this is done, she said, to the wall, to the anchor, to the chamber and the researcher who had stood in it 11 years ago and planned all of this with a faith in the future she could not have been certain was warranted. When all 6 pieces are home and the weapon is neutralized and the Pale Court doesn't have anything left to use against pack bonds, I want to come back here. She felt Draven's palm press against the wall beside hers. Yes, he said. Not for a purpose, she said. Not to extract anything or absorb anything or extend the anchor's reach. Just to stand in it, he said. To stand in it, she said. Yes, he said again. She looked at their hands on the warm stone, side by side, the compass and the anchor, two things built from the same framework, finding each other the way the researcher had trusted they would. She looked at him. He looked at her. An hour, she said. You brief Corvin. I talk to my brother. And then we go. And then we go. Brennan was in the courtyard when she came out of the main hall. He had graduated from the great hall and the attentive young wolves to the open air, and he was standing in the pale afternoon light looking up at the iron walls with an expression she recognized from childhood. The expression he used when he was cataloguing something, when the birdwatcher's part of his mind was doing what it always did and noting every feature of the thing in front of him with quiet, thorough attention. He looked at her when she crossed the courtyard. He looked at her face. He looked at her hands, the cord-burn scar on the left arm, the volcanic glass cut on the right palm, the iron dark stain on the blade she was checking as she walked because checking her blades when she walked was a habit 8 months deep. You're leaving again, he said. Today, she said. Yes. How long? I don't know. The Eastern Territories are 300 miles. The remaining 4 pieces after that are scattered. It could be months, he said. Possibly. He looked at the walls. I'm coming, he said. No, she said. Seren. You've been in a resonance suppression field for 8 months, she said. Your body needs time. Your resonance needs to stabilize after the extraction. You can't. I can navigate the salt flats, he said. I know the Eastern Territories. I spent 2 years there before the Iron Veil. I know the salt flats, the terrain, the pack structures, the pale quartz Eastern deployment patterns. She looked at him. You're not Iron Veil, she said. No, he said. I'm the person who can tell every bird in the eastern marshes and fix a broken cartwheel and navigate salt-flat terrain in the dark without a compass. He held her gaze. You've been alone for 8 months. You don't have to be anymore. She looked at him. She thought of the fire and the pine trees and Draven saying you've been carrying it alone for 8 months and you shouldn't have had to. She thought of the bolt, unlocked. She thought of all the things that had stopped being what they were when she stopped running from them. If I say yes, she said, you follow my operational lead. Every decision. No negotiating in the field. Yes, he said immediately. And you tell me the moment anything feels wrong with the resonance. The extraction changed things for you. The piece is gone but the place it occupied. I'll tell you, he said. Immediately. Not later. Immediately, he said. Not later. She looked at him for a moment. You're going to be in the way, she said. Probably, he said. I've been in your way since I was born. I don't see why that should change. She almost did not catch it in time. But she had spent 8 months on short sleep and cold camps and running face, and she was out of the energy required to catch everything. And the sound that escaped her was not small and not involuntary and carried in it 8 months of carrying and the specific relief of her brother alive and standing in front of her in a courtyard that was, in some way she was still not entirely finished processing, going to be the place she came back to. He crossed the courtyard and put his arms around her and she let him, briefly, because briefly was all she was prepared to allow and even briefly nearly undid her completely. I know, he said, into her hair. I know. I'm here. You're annoying, she said, into his shoulder. Consistently, he said. It's my best quality. She pulled back. She looked at him with the 8 months and the 70 dead and the cord burn and the volcanic glass cut and all of it still present, still carried, but differently now, not as weight pressing down but as weight distributed, held by more than one set of hands. Pack light, she said. We leave in an hour. The pack assembled in the courtyard to see them off. Not formally, Draven had not called them, she was fairly certain. They had simply appeared, the way the 4 wolves had appeared from the forest the day before, drawn by the bond's awareness of something significant occurring at the boundary of what they knew and what came next. 31 wolves in human form, standing in the pale afternoon light, with the iron walls behind them and the gate open ahead and the birch trees visible beyond it in the specific quality of late afternoon illumination that turns white bark gold. Corvin stood at the front. He looked at Draven with the expression of a beater who had already had every operational conversation that needed to be had and was now having the other kind. the kind that existed between people who had been in the same fire long enough that the words were mostly redundant. "Come back," he said. "Plan to," Draven said. Corvin looked at her, then at Brennan, then back at her. "The Eastern Salt Flats," he said. "Yes. The Pale Court's Eastern deployment has been documented in our records since Year 3, he said. "The files are in the strategy room, third shelf, bound in grey leather. I'll have them pulled and copied before you reach the birch trees." She looked at him. 78%, she said. "Higher now," he said. "Given the anchor." "Higher now," she agreed. He stepped back. She stood at the gate with Draven on her left and Brennan on her right and the compass in her chest pointing east and the iron walls at her back and the pack watching with that quality of people sending off something that is part of them and will find its way back. She turned to Draven. He was looking at her with the wintergold depth and the anchor's warmth and the load-bearing certainty and the specific quality of a man who is about to step through a gate into 300 miles of uncertain road and is not afraid, not even slightly, because the uncertainty is not what he is holding on to. What he is holding on to is present. "Right here." "Ready," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at the birch trees. She looked at the pale gold afternoon light turning the white bark into something almost warm. She thought of a woman's hands pressing dark clay into her skin in the dark, telling her that invisible things get searched for and uninteresting things get ignored. And she thought that she had spent her whole life trying to be uninteresting and the compass had been pointing regardless, had always been pointing, patient and certain and waiting for her to stop arguing with it. She thought of the chamber walls, of the land knowing her name, of the bolt and the fire and the pine forest, and together said like the only available answer. She thought of 5 more pieces and 5 more carriers and the Eastern Salt Flats and the Pale Court's final move and everything still between here and the end of it. And she thought, let's go end it. She stepped through the gate. Draven stepped through beside her. Brennan fell into step on her right, and the birch trees accepted them with the specific quality of trees that have been standing long enough to have noted the significance of footfalls before. Behind them, the iron gate swung closed. Not with finality. Not with the sound of something sealed against return. With the sound of something keeping what it had been trusted to keep, patient and warm and permanent. The way the anchor was permanent. The way the compass had always been pointing. The way 4 generations of deliberate, careful, living intention sounded when it held. Iron on iron. The bolt coming home. She did not look back. She had spent 30 years following the compass without knowing it, and 8 months running from the thing it was pointing at, and 3 days in a wolf pack pretending to be something she wasn't, and 4 days inside iron walls learning what she actually was. She knew the way back. The compass knew the way back. It always had. East, it said now. 300 miles. The salt flats. The carrier. The piece. And then the next one. And then the next. And then you're done running. She walked into the birch trees with the afternoon light turning everything gold and the compass pointing with its quiet, absolute certainty at everything that needed doing and everything waiting on the other side of it. Beside her, Draven shifted. She heard it and did not flinch. She watched from the corner of her eye as the charcoal and silver wolf fell into step beside her with that specific quality of something that had decided where it was going and was not negotiating the matter further. His eyes, when she looked at them directly, were the palest, warmest gold she had ever seen. Not winter gold. Not blade gold. The gold of a fire banked low and burning long. 300 miles, she said. The wolf looked at her. She almost made the sound. She let it happen, brief and warm and entirely unauthorized, and kept walking. Don't give me that look, she said. I can feel you giving me that look. Beside her, Brennan made the sound instead, a short, genuine, unguarded laugh, and somewhere in the birch trees a bird lifted off at the sound, bright against the pale sky. Marsh finch, Brennan said, watching it go. Eastern variant. You can tell by the tail pattern. They don't usually come this far west this time of year. She looked at the bird. She looked at her brother. She looked at the wolf matching her pace on her left side with the anchor's warmth moving through the silver threads of his coat like light through dark water. Tell me about the salt flats, she said to Brennan. And she walked east. Into everything still to come. Into everything the compass had always been pointing at. Into everything that was, finally, beginning.